Let's call to order the Wednesday, September 10th, 2014 meeting of the Planning and Transportation Commission. And Secretary Elner, please call the roll.
Commissioner Alchek, Commissioner Gardias,
Present.
Vice Chair Keller,
Present.
Commissioner King, Chair Michael,
Present.
Commissioner Rosenblum, Commissioner Tanaka, 4 present, and Commissioner King did email me to say he would not be here this evening.
And Commissioner Rosenblum conferred with the City Attorney, and because the first information item on RPP potentially affects his neighborhood, he's recused himself from that discussion and will come late. So with that, let's begin with a report from Director Gilliman.
Thank you, Chair Michael. Commissioners, I have a brief director's report. First, I wanted to draw your attention to the tentative agenda that Robin handed out. We previously decided that we were going to cancel the meeting on September 24th, and that's reflected here. Instead, we're holding a meeting on October 1st, and it's actually going to be quite a full agenda. Then we're also thinking of canceling the meeting on October 8th, but you will have that joint session with the council on October 20th and a meeting on October 29th. So we still managed to squeeze in 3 meetings in the month of October. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Other than that, I just wanted to brief you on the council's upcoming and recent discussions. This Monday they had a discussion about there was actually a study session about potential changes to commercial zoning districts and zoning map related to commercial zoning. It was a good 2.5, 3-hour conversation, a lot of great ideas on the table. And so staff is going to assess all of the ideas that came together and bring it back in the context of the comp plan discussion at a special meeting on October the 8th. That's a Wednesday. So I encourage you to stay tuned on that. In addition, we have upcoming items at the council. September 15th, next week, is the Kirtner condo map that the commission recommended recently. Should be a quick item. Then on October 6th, the council will have their study session on PC reform. So I want to thank the chair for helping us draft a executive summary that will go along with the minutes from your 2 sessions on this topic to the council on October 6th. That day they'll also hear an item related to CPI. So it'll be a full agenda for us on planning issues. That's my report. Thank you.
So thank you for that. So Commissioner Tanaka has arrived and is present. And let's go to oral communications. Vice Chair Keller.
Yes, we have one speaker. Gee, it's loud. We have one speaker. It's Mark Weiss, and you'll have 3 minutes.
I'm kind of laughing because I spent 3 minutes in front of council on Monday, and I did not say a word. I think there's a Japanese concept, maso koru. It's called silent condemnation. And I stared at council apropos of the grand jury report. And that's what I'm here, although I'm using my vocal cords and trying to communicate a little more directly tonight. I am quite concerned about the Santa Clara grand jury report of June 16th, 2014, and we are obligated to respond within 90 days. And I'm a little concerned that we're not taking this very seriously. And there was some talk at the meeting, if people were there Monday night, that, why it took till 11 o'clock to even get to the item. Were they filibustering or whatnot? And in my 3 minutes here, I'm going to try and bridge Kevin Ryan to Henry David Thoreau, which is probably, I have a rush of thoughts here. But so Dennis Burns is one of the few people, he is one of the people I hold in the highest regard in our civil service, and he is our police chief, and he was our acting fire chief, and he incidentally was also a track star at St. Ignatius High School, and I hold St. Ignatius in high regard, although I'm a gun graduate myself. And Dennis Burns told me he was a classmate with a man named Kevin Ryan. And the only thing probably I have in common with Kevin Ryan is that we're both Dartmouth alums. Kevin Ryan was the federal prosecutor removed in a right-wing coup by the Cheney-Bush people because he was too tough on certain elements of corruption. That's a theory. But Dennis knows him. Coincidentally or not, if you excuse the digression, I have a classmate, Brian Stretch, a Dartmouth classmate who's a St. Ignatius 82 and a Dartmouth 86, who was a quarterback at Dartmouth and a running back, and a pitcher on the baseball team, and he's a federal prosecutor now in Marin County, AUSA. And basically, I think we're not taking the grand jury report. I actually, as I've said to you guys before, you five esteemed commissioners, that maybe your ability to articulate problems with nuance and have effect. I've asked you to write white papers. I've read a lot of your white papers or colleagues' memos, and I think it takes some of your abilities to really adequately respond to the grand jury report. I don't like our current plan. And Henry David Thoreau, 1849, essay called Civil Disobedience, which is a bit of a misnomer. It's more like our current concept of leaning in or moving on. And it means that people who are close to power have to exert their influence on the powers that be and get them to raise the standards a little bit. I just am a little bit concerned with the leadership's response. The press seems to be The Weekly, Bill Johnson, The Weekly, told me that my observations and nuances about what I feel is an attempt by leadership to intimidate and stifle dissent. He says, oh, that wasn't substantiated. And I said, 20 other commenters that you did not delete, you haven't even substantiated their identity. Yet when I say that a council member intimidated me from speaking out, they're like, oh, we can't print that. You can't prove that. I think it's protected by the First Amendment, like my opinions on leadership. Anyhow, sirs and madams, I don't think any of you will be spending any time in federal prison, but maybe it would take a federal prosecutor or investigator to get to the bottom of what the heck is going on here. Where is the $1.7 million that we're spending to revise the comp plan? What is the $500,000 we spent on the Arriaga Towers?
So if you could wrap up, that'd be great.
Guys, gals, we can do better.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. With that, and just to note that the Brown Act precludes us from commenting on oral communications matters not on our agenda, much as we might be tempted, particularly with such rich literary references. We will go to the first item, which is an information item. But let me, just before that, on our agenda we have 3 items this evening. An update on the residential preferential parking situation, then a study session on shuttle services, and then a public hearing on review of the draft housing element. Each of these is potentially of great importance to the community, and so we want to be careful to manage our time to give adequate attention to each one. On the RPP update, note that this is coming back to the PTC, I believe, on November 12th per our tentative agenda. And this evening is intended as an update and with no request that the Commission take action. And so we're hoping that we can complete this update to everyone's satisfaction in approximately an hour. Then we may take a brief break and go to the study session on shuttle services, which is a little bit more detailed, and we're going to allocate 90 minutes for that, and then we're going to go to the review of the housing element and take as much time as needed, but hopefully that will get done in about an hour. So with that expectation, let's move right to the information update and get a staff report from Jessica Sullivan. All yours.
Thank you, Chair Michael. Let me just open the presentation. Good evening, Commissioners. So tonight we are giving an update on the RPP program that we've been working on for the past several months with the Downtown RPP Stakeholder Group. We're going to go through just a quick schedule update so you can sort of see where we are in the process, and then also give a little more detailed update on some of the characteristics of the program as we're currently discussing and proposing, and then talk a little bit about the next steps for the program and sort of the next iteration of the downtown resolution. So this slide shows our schedule. I apologize, it's a little difficult to read up there, but hopefully in your packet it's a bit clearer. We're definitely in the thick of the process right now, developing both the draft ordinance and the resolution, which have been distributed to the RPP stakeholder group as well as the general public. There's a downtown resident survey which was distributed August 18th, so we're currently tabulating responses to the survey. We'll talk a little bit more about the content of the survey. September is also a busy month for us, as in order to meet the schedule that we've targeted for the program, we have to release several requests for proposals, including an RFP for contract enforcement for the RPP district, as well as online permit sales and permit management. So staff is working on those solicitations as well. As you mentioned, we are scheduled to come back to the Planning Commission with the final recommendation on November 12th, and then we're scheduled to go to Council on December 1st. You can see here in the little bar chart schedule, our plan is to take the ordinance and the downtown resolution to council in December, and if council approves as proposed, then we would also be looking at awarding contracts for the services that we need to move the program forward, which would include the online permit sales, the contract enforcement, and also our general services contract for signage installation. So if those do move forward, we would be looking at beginning the implementation of the program in January, although we do expect it to take a few months for those services to be fully up and running. So our schedule has us looking at somewhere in March or April sort of start time for an RPP district if it is approved to move forward. So I'm going to go through what have surfaced as the general program recommendations at this point in the process, and give you an update on where we are with these. So the stakeholder group has actually come to consensus on, I think, a really large number of items as far as the program design goes. The first, as you're probably familiar with, the boundaries of the downtown RPP district that are being proposed are represented on the map on the screen. As we're getting survey results back, we potentially might want to adjust these boundaries, but as proposed, the district would include the area that's bounded by Palo Alto Avenue, Guinda, Embarcadero, and Alma, and not including the existing SOFA commercial areas and downtown business districts. Permit sales for residents, we've talked about the idea of only providing 2 permits per household, but we did receive a lot of feedback that residents felt they should be able to purchase as many permits as needed, potentially at an escalating price. So that was the recommendation we made in the draft of the downtown resolution, which was distributed yesterday. The survey to residents also suggested a $50 permit cost for residents. Feedback suggested that residents wanted permits to be free, and so that was also a recommendation in phase 1 of the resolution. People desire that the permits for the program will be sold online. So as I mentioned, we're in the process of soliciting a vendor which would manage online permit sales. The level of support for the resident survey in order to pass the program, staff had originally presented in the ordinance supermajority support, or 70% ruling in favor of the RPP district, and the feedback from the stakeholder group was that this was too high. Most of them felt that a 50% plus 1 vote should be sufficient to pass an RPP district. Staff has not made a final recommendation on that, but that is the feedback we've received. Another component which was important was the idea of transferring permits between residents and their guests, and potentially also between employees. So the transferability of permits will depend on the types of permits that we ultimately have, as well as our enforcement strategy. There's been also significant discussion on the cost of the employee or commuter permits, as they're being called. There are many who felt that we needed to provide a sort of lower wage permit option for those whose income was below a certain threshold. So in the draft resolution that we distributed, we proposed that that we sell permits at a reduced rate based on income, and there are ways of managing that process during the permit sales transaction. The standard permit for an employee was suggested at $300, although there are several stakeholders who believe it should be higher than that, in par with the downtown garage costs. The hours of enforcement are being presented as 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, although we are also getting feedback on the survey that maybe some areas would have different hours of enforcement for different neighborhood characteristics. The area where there's potentially the sort of most discussion or most variety of opinion is in the area of how we actually sell permits to the employees or the non-resident parkers. As we discussed in June when we came to the Planning Commission, the stakeholder group had an original proposal which was to physically designate employee spaces within the district by allocating them on the street. And the residents suggested that 20% of the available spaces was an appropriate number to do that. That idea has emerged as the favored approach among the group. Staff did present a sort of alternate proposal, which was to create a zone closer to the downtown core where permit sales would be regulated, and then everywhere outside the zone they would not be regulated, in an effort to sort of allocate the permits across the district, as this was the main concern that sort of stimulated the original proposal. But the group was not in favor of that idea. Another proposal which was presented was the idea of selling, or actually giving away, unlimited free permits to anyone who wanted them, in an effort to collect data on the types of permits sold and where people were parking. So in the draft resolution that you saw yesterday and was distributed to the stakeholder group, the staff proposal was actually that we take a phased approach in the distribution of permits. So phase one of the program would be a sort of 6-month data collection period, where we would sell unlimited permits to employees who wanted them, and then provide 2 free permits to residential addresses. During that period, we would conduct occupancy studies to determine where people were parking, how many people were parking, and what an appropriate number of employee permits should be moving forward. That phase would eliminate the parkers who are no longer going to be able to purchase permits, which would include people riding Caltrain and not using the Caltrain lot, Stanford parkers, and other people who don't work or live downtown. After phase 1, we would move into a 12-month trial period where we would actually begin to regulate employee permit sales based on data that was gathered in the first phase of the program. And the stakeholder recommendation is still to allocate spots within the district in an effort to spread out the presence of non-resident parking. The staff proposal in response to that was to say maybe we could sell permits and allocate them on a block-by-block basis so that you don't have to physically stripe spots within the neighborhood, but it would still achieve the same effect. So quick update on the survey. As most of you know, we distributed a residential RPP survey to the residents that live within the boundaries of the area that's been described. It's about 4,600 residential addresses, and we're still receiving surveys on a daily basis. The survey was designed to capture input on 2 main questions. The first was, whether or not the resident is in favor of an RPP program given these characteristics. And additionally, whether the resident would be in favor of physically allocating spots in the neighborhoods to dedicate to employees, since that was the favorite approach from the stakeholder group. The first round of surveys went out on August 18th, and we're planning on sending out the second round of surveys next week. So far we've received about a 25% response rate to the survey. So I think our next steps are gathering feedback from the stakeholders and from other constituents on the draft ordinance and downtown resolution. We're still refining details on the enforcement strategy as well as permit sales and developing the program costs based on projected enforcement costs. We have two more RPP stakeholder meetings scheduled. One of them is next week on September 17th, and the following is October 23rd. And then, as we mentioned, we'll go back to the Planning Commission on November 12th. Thank you.
And thank you, Jessica. Do we have any speaker cards from members of the public who'd like to speak to this topic?
Looks like we do.
Okay, Vice Chair Keller.
Yes, the first speaker will be Gab Layton, to be followed by Michael Hodos. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Gab Layton, and I was a resident on the Stakeholder Committee. And first of all, I want to say thanks so much to Jessica, because she has worked incredibly hard to get to the point where we are. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for what she's pulled off today. But there is, from my perspective, there's one critical piece that's missing in this proposal, and that is that there needs to be a cap on the number of non-resident parking spaces from day one. I think that without a cap, the RPP has no teeth and does not actually put significant pressure on the city to solve the supply-demand imbalance that exists. In the second stakeholder meeting that we had, there was consensus between the business reps and the residents that 20% of a block face was a fair and reasonable arrangement. I think that they understood that the residents were in pain, and we understood that it was going to be difficult for them, but that was the trade-off that we were all prepared to arrive at. So I guess what I'm really suggesting is skip phase 1, go straight to phase 2. I think the argument that is being used why we need to be in phase 1 is to ascertain how many employees need to park in the neighbourhoods. I think we can fairly establish that just through the sale of permits. The sale of permits does not have to necessarily correlate with the number of parking spots allotted in the neighbourhoods. And I think you have to realise that there's a market situation here. It's what the market will bear, the residential market. They've been waiting 10 years for this, and I don't think you want to test them too far with the solution of the RPP. On that note, I would just like to thank Jessica once again. Thanks very much for your work.
Our next speaker is Michael Hodos, and that's the last card we have.
To the findings of the stakeholder group. Thank you. Hold on. No, go forward. Maybe I missed it. Stop. One more. I would like to point out, good evening. My name is Michael Hodos. I live on Bryan Street. I've been here since 1978. So I've seen the blossoming of intrusive parking in the residential neighborhoods and the effect it's had on the quality of life for quite some time. Two things I'd like to bring to your attention this evening. One is that item number 2, distribute free permits for a trial period to determine the number of employee permits needed. While initially that concept was embraced by the majority of the stakeholder group as indicated up there, and by the way, I'm a member of the stakeholder group representing Professorville. It came up at the very end of a meeting, and when a majority of the members had a time to think about the implications of it, the vast majority of them withdrew their yes vote. And I just think that you should be aware of that for item number 2 up there. The second thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that between 2011 and 2014, intrusive parking in the residential neighborhoods in downtown North and downtown South. Downtown South encompasses University South and Professorville. Roughly 30 street faces were filled up between 2011 and 2014. That's from the city's own data. If you take the rate of increase on a yearly basis from 2014 forward to 2017 and apply that same rate of increase, you see that another over 40 street faces are going to be gobbled up by non-resident parkers who work downtown. So that means from 2011 to 2017, more than roughly 75 street faces will be essentially taken away from the neighborhoods, and with the impact that it has on the people who live there. Blocked driveways, trash in their parkways, no place for their guests to park. We have vendors that won't even come into the neighborhood anymore because they can't find parking and they're unwilling to carry their tools from 3 blocks away. So it's had a deleterious effect on the quality of life in the neighborhood, and it's only going to get worse unless there's a cap, as Gab mentioned. Right now, the way the resolution is written, the planning director has the right to issue as many permits as, in this case, she deems appropriate. And that means that there's no end to what's happening right now, unless a cap is put in place. Thank you.
The final speaker is Nielsen Buchanan.
Nielsen Buchanan, 155 Bryant Street. I also am one of the stakeholders, and I would like to acknowledge the marvelous work that Jessica's pulled together on an extremely complex and contentious issue that stakeholders so far have probably agreed on more than we've disagreed, but we're just now getting down to the real stuff. There's only one person in the world that thinks I'm a genius, and that's my middle grandson. And I got a birthday card from him, and he'd done some internet research and his 70th birthday 10 days ago, and he said, "Dear Grandpa, you're going to live 17 more years." And so obviously numbers come naturally to my family gene pool, but he had researched the life expectancy of males at age 70. And so if I can get 8 more years of this, I guess I will devote it to permit parking. I can tell you a lot of stuff about permit parking. I can tell you how many cars were on the top of the Cowper garage today at midday. 3. I can tell you there were only 48 people parked in the permit spaces on the 5th floor. There were 48 places parked on the Bryant garage, and it was about half full, the top floor permit parking. The good news is High Street had 17 valet parked cars. It had started to peak back up again, thank God, because it had fallen into the summer doldrums. That's not what we're really here to talk about today. And I felt obligated to come here tonight really to tell you what I don't know. It is premature to make any intelligent comments about the permit parking as it unfolds, and it's very simple. The ordinance makes a great deal of sense, but you can't evaluate the ordinance without knowing what the resolution says, and that just came out Tuesday afternoon. And the truth of the matter is you can't comment intelligently on the resolution until you know what the administrative regs are. And what we residents, and I think I speak for the other 5 stakeholders, that we really plan to take that back to the process that we agreed to, collaboration at the stakeholder group, starting again on the 17th. And we will be back eventually, but it just isn't possible to enlighten you that much about the details of it because it's just evolving. The resolution really starts to get down to the nitty-gritty, and I owe it to the stakeholder group to talk there first. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public here this evening who would like to submit a speaker card and talk to this update? So if not, let's bring it back, close the public meeting and come back to the commission. I'm looking to see which commissioner is ready with questions or comments for the staff on their work. Vice Chair Keller.
So first thing, I'd like to understand.
Why don't you give yourself 5 minutes?
Sure, thank you. So firstly, I'd like to understand how this differs from what is currently existing in College Terrace and what's currently existing in Crescent Park.
Thank you, Vice Chair Keller. So the College Terrace RPP program does not sell permits to non-residents. So it's significantly different.
And how much does it charge?
Right now, the charge for permits is $40 annually for residents.
And Crescent Park?
And Crescent Park is, it's technically not really an RPP program because it has a different function, but it restricts parking between the hours of 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on certain streets in Crescent Park to Palo Alto residents who live on those specific streets.
Thank you. So a couple things. Firstly, in terms of RFPs, there's a possibility of having an RFP that's based on qualified bidders based on price alone. And there's also potential for RFPs based on a point system where you allow points, some points get based on the price and some points based on the quality or innovation or things like that. It seems to me that considering that this involves some potential for creativity in terms of how permits are sold, a point-based system is better than a price-only system, and I'm hoping you're considering that. The second thing, this is pretty minor, but I don't like 50% plus one because it has a problem if the number is odd. The term I prefer is simple majority. So one of the things here is that we are dealing with essentially a hunting license to look for parking spaces. And if you allow too many permits to be issued, then you'll have what is known as the search for parking, and people go around and around and around and around in blocks looking for a place to park, and therefore congestion will increase. On the other hand, if you essentially limit the number of parking spaces to some percentage over the number that you expect, and then and titrate that, maybe as you see that there's a certain amount that you allow, and if there's enough spaces available, you may allow a few more over time. Then you reduce that hunting license effect and reduce congestion. So I think that that's something worthwhile considering. I would be opposed to unlimited employee permits. Secondly, specific spaces may be better in theory than in practice. In theory, it might make sense to say, oh yeah, we'll put 3 or 5 or how many spaces per block face or whatever. In practice is, hey, I don't want an employee space in front of my house. So that's an issue. The next thing is that I think that no permits should be free, not even for a trial period. It's okay to charge a nominal amount, even if it's $5, but somebody has to pay it and get it. You don't mail it out automatically. It has to be based on applying for it. Okay? Secondly, you might want to consider over time, and I'm not sure this needs to be done initially, but if somebody needs extra permits, it might be because they have limited off-street parking or no off-street parking, or because they have a lot of bedrooms. There are some places, like for example on Alma Street, there's some houses with lots and lots of bedrooms, and therefore that might get more permits. So you might take into account the number of bedrooms and number of off-street spaces in terms of how many permits residents can get. The next thing is that the permits should be allocated, the non-residence permits should be allocated first to businesses located in downtown North or in SOFA, or SOFA 1, SOFA 2. The area in which the permits apply, businesses located in those areas should have the priority. So, for example, anthropology should have priority over a business, or Watercourse Way should have priority over a business located in downtown core. And then after you do allocate those out, then you can allocate ones to low-income retail workers and then other workers, and so higher income workers. So basically, make sure that you put a specific priority for businesses located in those districts. And I may have a few things later on, but I'll let people go first.
Commissioner Tanaka.
I think you mentioned that 25% of the survey results have come in so far. Can you tell us what did the survey results say so far?
We don't have exact numbers right now. We do know that it's very close.
Okay, so it wasn't like an overwhelming yay or nay so far?
It's very close.
Very close, okay. And so the second round of surveys will be the same survey, or?
Yes, we'll be sending out the same survey because we thought, well, maybe we could modify the survey, but it didn't seem appropriate given that some people got this survey and some others got a different one. But we will have posted the updated, the draft resolution on the feedback page, which all of the residents can refer to. So they will see the updated sort of program recommendations.
Okay. And will the second survey be marked somehow so it's a second survey, or is it going to be the same exact survey?
I think we can mark it so that it says, second chance. It's going to have a different date for response on it.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, and then is the plan for here to simply do it block by block or street face by street face? Which one's in the program, which one's out of the program, or what's the idea behind which streets are in and which streets are out?
So we're sort of using. Our intention was to show the overall program boundaries as the part of the proposal, but looking at the survey results is important because we want to see if certain streets are really not impacted, does it make sense to modify the boundaries based on the survey results?
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. And then I think Vice Chair Keller asked about the difference between this program and College Terrace. And for College Terrace, can you remind us what was the approval level needed for that program?
The approval level was 50, well, the majority. I'll say 50% plus one.
Okay.
Yeah.
For each of the street faces?
For each block, yeah. It was done on a block by block basis, and I think we had some lessons learned about that process, given that, when you have certain blocks that opt in, as it was called, then the immediately adjacent blocks just experience the problem as soon as those streets are opted in.
Okay. And right now, what's a backlog of people who want permits that can't get them right now? Or is the backlog gone completely?
For the downtown garages?
Yeah.
Well, the wait list is, we have a small wait list on, I don't know the exact numbers. I can't tell you off the top of my head. We have a small wait list on some of the garages, and we have we have lots of spots right now available in Civic Center. So we've been reaching out to folks and letting them know about that.
Okay. And what do you account for the reason why the wait list has dropped? Because I remember it being at one point very, very large.
Yes, the wait list used to be quite large, and we did a lot of work aggressively selling more permits in an effort to get rid of the wait list and fill up the garages. And I think we saw some success. I think the summer months we did see garages more full normally than they are over the summer months. But still, with free parking in the neighborhoods, we still don't have the incentive structure in the right place.
I see. Okay. Okay, those are the questions I had so far. Thank you.
Commissioner Alchek.
There's so much to say. This will probably be a little out of order. I just want to address some comments sort of as they're in my head. The first is that I hope that that the process for approving the permit program is not assessed on a block-by-block basis. We weren't very involved in the Crescent Park permit process, but as a resident, I was personally involved. And while I'm not going to comment on whether or not I perceive that program as being successful or not, the process itself was tremendously flawed, precisely because by allowing a block to vote on its participation, the blocks that were experiencing issues pushed those issues to the next block, and then the next block was forced to participate in the program, and then the next block was forced to participate in the program. And because it spanned a few weeks, or really just the fear that it would trickle down, I think forced individuals who may not necessarily have wanted to participate in that program to participate in that program. So I think based on that experience, I think it's of critical importance that if there's going to be a 50%, majority threshold here, that should apply to the entire area designated as participating in the zone. So if the borders are X, Y, and Z, then I'm not even sure who gets to vote, but those individuals should vote as a collective group, not block by block. And that being said, I would hope that, again, this is a trial, and so if in fact we decide, or if in fact the City Council decides to move forward without that sort of threshold vote, I would hope that once the trial is over, and this applies also to the Crescent Park trial, which should be concluding next month, I would hope that they would then reassess the support, whether it's in the Crescent Park neighborhood or this neighborhood, on the entire boundary area, as opposed to block by block. Because in that regard, once you've experienced the program, being able to assess it again is a huge part of this. I also, or I should say, I don't share Commissioner Kaler's view that the trial program has to have a specific cost per permit. I think that we're asking residents to go through, or I don't think we're asking residents. I think residents and business owners and employees are taking this enormous step towards potentially solving this problem together. And I think that there's something to be said for making it less burdensome while we're working on it. So I don't necessarily think residential permits, this is proposal 2, have to be priced. I think they could be theoretically free. I want to mention that in the residential rental market, housing rental market, there is this accepted limitation, landlord limitation, which is to say that you can restrict occupancy in a residential rental unit to 2 occupants plus 1 for, so 2 occupants per bedroom plus 1. So if you have a 3-bedroom, that's theoretically 7 occupants. I'm not suggesting that every residence that has 3 bedrooms should be allowed to have 7 permits, but I am suggesting here that this notion that there wasn't really an identification of a cap. There was sort of the suggestion that maybe every additional residential permit would be more expensive than the previous one in the final program. I'd like to think that there would be at least a cap that was analogous to that limitation, so that you couldn't have a residence with 15 permits, that if the resident only has 2 bedrooms, then maybe 5. I'm assuming there will be a cap, but I think that argument at least sets one cap. I think Commissioner Keller sort of mentioned a very interesting point, which I did not really think about when I went through the materials, which is this notion of, I'll just use the same example he did, whether the anthropology employee has a higher priority, should stand in line ahead of, let's say, an employee of the university cafe. That's interesting, because the assumption is that do our current garages location create a stronger preference because of their proximity to certain businesses? So only businesses that are really close to those parking garages really want to park there. And so I think that and I'll try to wrap it up quickly, but I think that there's a question here as to how we evaluate the competing business owners' priority. Would a commercial business that might have a greater number of employees be entitled to a greater number of permits than a retail business, which might only have 2 employees for the same square footage, if it's like a small retail shop. And then the last question I had for you, or the last 2 comments, was the issue of transferability. I think that's really important because it encourages the use of some current transportation innovations like Zipcar, carpooling, especially for employee permits, right? So if there's a shared permit and one employee drives one day and another employee drives another day, that encourages carpooling if they can transfer them from one car to the other. And then the same goes for residents. If I am a resident and I have a permit, but I don't use it every day because I rent a Zip car the days that I need it, then having it tied to the car. And then the last question would be, was there a rationale for identifying the time frame on the street for non-permit holders to 2 hours as opposed to 1 hour or 3 hours? Was there a rubric there?
So Jessica, if you wanted to respond to anything at any one point, you're certainly welcome to. But if not...
I know we have a second study session, so some of this you can come back.
Yeah. But if not, we'll just go to Commissioner Gardias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So in this first round, I would like to just address the greater aspect of this, then we're going to get to the details. So last time when we met, right, I spoke about a mobility concept. And I looked at the draft of the ordinance, and I was hoping that some trace of this discussion would be there. I know that maybe it's not fair just to expect from this RPP program to be to address mobility aspect, because this concept should cut across all the transportation ordinances and variety of the ordinances that we have, or some other restrictions and regulations in this matter, right? But regardless, right, I think that certain definitions may be put in place and become part of this ordinance, and then also the thinking about the mobility concept may start sinking through this language. And just to remind this what this is about, right? It's not a new concept. It's in many cities around the world that pretty much you establish mobility zones that relate to the proximities of the transportation hubs or some nodes. And then based on those, you can subdivide the cities on the zones, and you can say, well, these people, they have closer to the train, so apparently they are very mobile. They may not need the car because they have a secondary means of transportation, or you can just pretty much just hop on a train. And this way they are more mobile than the other residents. They are in the farther distance, right? So as a result, in the downtown area, you may say that certain group would be mobile because they can arrive by buses, by trains, by taxis, or some other means of transportations, right? And then you can tie this ordinance to that concept, which would allow us to, later on when we're going to discuss a variety of other programs, also tie those other programs to the same concept and have this common denominator of the discussion. And so this is number one. So please think about this, how possible it would be just to implement some seeds of this thinking in this ordinance. The second aspect, it's a comment related to this, right? I think that somewhere in this writing, there was a paragraph about that it would not be possible to expand this ordinance into other districts because of the competing or different interests of other districts. I remember there was a paragraph about this. So I think that if we were going just to have some aspect of mobility, then the discussion of just having RPP for one district, then a different one for another, and then totally different for another, we would probably be able to avoid that different variances of different RPP programs if we establish the same platform for the cross-town discussion about how people should move, how the visitors should occupy those spaces, and so forth, right? Thank you very much.
Okay, my turn. So if we had Ken Alsman here tonight, I think we'd have somebody with an estimate of the parking deficit, and I'm just hoping that the city is, with its various surveys and methodologies, is keeping track of the contextual issue of what the parking deficit, so-called, is, and any rate of change or increase in that deficit. Next, I want to encourage that, although this is the RPP program has got a lot of urgency to it, it's a little bit like maybe squeezing the balloon, to the extent that there's also a parallel effort involved in transportation demand management, and I think that acknowledging that parallel effort and the status of the TDM program will be very useful to understand how this fits into that context, because if you do one thing, it may simply shift pressure into another space. Going back to the parking deficit and this concept of using a phase one and through experience collecting some data in terms of participation, I still wonder about the urgency of implementing a business registry, because it seems to me, and has always seemed to me, that that's a pretty useful means of collecting the relevant data that would feed into the TDM program and the RPP program, and I would urge staff and council to give that some priority. I think that the issue of the parking deficit, the TDM program, and RPP also brings up the issue of what, if anything, may happen in the future about curbside metering, and whether that has impact on people who park in this designated neighborhood, including residents, employees of businesses, and shoppers. I'm not entirely clear on what we're hoping to accomplish with the people who park in the neighborhoods and then ride on Caltrain, and how they'll be affected by this. And then I have a sort of a general observation that I think, in addition to trying to solve a problem with the RPP program, is also a purpose of trying to modify behavior, and behavior modification. I think we're talking about modifying the behavior of visitors, specifically employees of downtown businesses. And I think that part of what you're doing may be enhanced by prioritizing and considering market-based solutions in terms of what are the various costs and benefits to the behavior. So I think that in terms of, maximizing or optimizing the efficient use of the garages versus the neighborhood intrusion, the fact that the garage permits are more expensive and the neighborhood permits are less expensive means that you're pushing people out of the garages into the neighborhoods, when I think you maybe want to do the other thing. You might want to have garage use be less expensive and the neighborhood intrusion be more expensive. And then there's various, let's say, free behaviors like carpooling, transit use, Uber, cycling, walking, that you want to encourage as well, where feasible. So some of this seems backwards to me in terms of the incentives, and what I think B.F. Skinner would say. I wonder what is going to happen ultimately with the use of the color zones and the 2-hour limits. I personally find the 2-hour limit, if you have sort of a lunch and a meeting, it's not long enough. So it seems artificially distorted. And the last time I got a haircut downtown, it was late because the lady cutting my hair had to run out and move her car. And so that was kind of rough. So I think those are my just issues that I would note, and I will stop there. Just note on time check, we're now at 5 minutes to 7, and we're hoping to wrap this up by 7:15. So let's have a second round, which is sort of a lightning round, and maybe people restrict their comments to things that they deem really important and try to do it in 3 minutes. So with that, I think Commissioner Gardias wanted to get into some more detailed comments.
Yeah, I mean, this will be just about the transitional part to this program. I try to be brief, right? But when you're going to start this program, right, there needs to be some sort of transitional period to make sure that we can adjust, be flexible, right? So I will just ask a couple of questions. So please respond so we can understand, right? Do you have a count of the spaces, which will be supply of the spaces? I presume that you do, right?
Yes, we have an inventory.
You do, right? So pretty much within this transitional period, right, there would have to be supply-demand balancing, right? So I don't know. I would like to understand how you're gonna achieve it, right? Maybe the shorter periods of 6 months registrations would be appropriate for the first year, or maybe year and a half, right, till you find the right balance. And then, of course, you can just review your supply and demand on the annual basis or something like this. So the question is pretty much how you would like to handle the transitional period.
I think what you're getting at is exactly why we think that the phase 1 is very important, because we need to look at the condition of parking that exists when we don't have the people who park their car when they're going to ride Caltrain or work at PAMF or work at Stanford and don't actually live or work downtown. We need some way of looking at the parking conditions in that space to identify what types of employees, as far as income or service sector, we have parking. And so right now we don't have a way of capturing that data. So our thought is that during that phase 1, we will be able to identify, qualitatively and quantitatively what's actually happening in the district. We would hope to potentially send out another survey, and I think, as Chair Michael suggested, or maybe it was, I actually can't remember who said it, but it's a good idea to sort of collect the data again on the actual experience of the program, because I think that's going to tell us a lot about what the call it phase 2, or call it the phase where we start to limit the employee permits, is very important.
You may use registration period as a survey point, and then pretty much the registration would give you a number of the answers, because this will be pre-registration for acquiring the permits, and then of course those residents or businesses, they will of course supply you with all the data, right? That would allow you to know who's who, and then what buckets they
that's right.
They fill in, right?
Commissioner Tanaka.
I'll keep this short. So during the period, I think for understand, for the current permits, for the garages, you guys try to oversell them, because not every...
We do oversell them significantly, yes.
Okay. And so I guess that would happen as well for phase 1?
Yeah, so normally when you have, I'm just sort of looking at other parking permit programs, even in programs where they do allocate specific spots or zones where specific subsets of people can park, they oversell those spots as well. Sure. Not as much as we oversell the garages, but to some, 20 or 30%.
Okay. Okay, so I guess you'll use that overselling factor as a way to also regulate. There'll be some sort of amount of overselling, even though you say this is the amount of employee parking available. Okay. Vice Chair Keller mentioned about how the permits shouldn't be free, and I actually agree with that as well. I think it's important there should be some sort of payment. It shouldn't just be free. So I think that kind of makes sense. And then is there thoughts about in terms of enforcement? How much enforcement will happen?
Well, just a quick comment on the free permits. We, staff as well as the stakeholder group, our recommendation was that permits should not be free. But the overwhelming feedback we've received from the survey and from other sources is that residents do not feel that they should have the burden of paying for something that they don't see as a problem they caused. So that's where the proposal came from.
But isn't the point of this to also be revenue neutral?
The direction we had from council was actually not that we feel obliged to make the program revenue neutral. And the current costs of enforcement, at least what we're modeling at these, the rates that we've suggested, the program will not be, revenue neutral.
How much enforcement is anticipated?
Well, the enforcement, I think we don't know exactly yet. Enforcement typically works almost as soon as you put up the signs. That's almost the thing you need to do. It's not so much actually giving citations. But generally what happens is, they go out there every day or every few days, a few times a week is normally what works. And then you have a sort of period of getting a lot of citations, and after that it drops off as people get the program.
Okay. One interesting idea the chair made a while back, and I don't know if it's practical, but was doing it not by number of cars, but by length of car. And so that's actually an interesting idea that maybe the chair will talk about again. Thank you.
Commissioner Alchek.
Okay, so with respect to the Caltrain rider who doesn't reside in the neighborhood and parks there, that individual is not represented on the stakeholder committee, and for good reason, because that's one of the problems we're trying to eliminate, right? And we need to, and so one of the arguments for the phases is so that we can get a sense for, well, how much of a problem did that solve?
That's right.
Okay. All right, and then to be clear about what I was sort of suggesting earlier, when I sort of read through this, it didn't occur to me until Commissioner Keller mentioned it, that employees, let's say, well, let me put it this way. I perceived the employee permits as being available for employees who were working in businesses within those residential streets. Take, for example, like anthropology, or like if there's an architect's office. I didn't really anticipate that there would be demand all the way down University, up and down University for those same spots. And I think that there's, if let's say you own your business, there should be a separation between, let's say, a business owner, and let's for a minute assume that they own the property as well. A business and property owner who's not a resident on that street, and a business owner who is not on that, who's in a university street. So if you are the owner of the anthropology building and you manage that business, let's just say that's one in the same, there should be sort of, I definitely agree that that was sort of the business person I was thinking of when we were talking about the permits.
So can I just ask a clarification on that? Because I think I know where you're going, but I'm not quite sure I understand. So are you?
I'm thinking of like the cobbler.
Right.
Right.
But is it because the cobbler's on a sort of side street off of University and can't walk to a garage?
The cobbler might be a bad example, because out in front of him is already a 2-hour parking restriction. I mean, I believe there are businesses that actually operate within the residential neighborhoods that are in front of streets that are unrestricted. So unlike the cobbler, right? And I think anthropology.
So maybe some of like the businesses on Middlefield?
Yeah.
Okay.
That those are somewhat different, because there is no 2-hour restriction in front of their property. So their customers can't even really park close to their business, unlike the...
Right.
Anyways. Okay.
I think I see where you're okay,
yeah,
I understand.
There should be a distinction there, I think. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that I found that the staff presented approach of selling block face specific permits as opposed to the striping of a specific spot for employee parking. I found the block face selling permits idea more compelling. That, like, the notion that there might be this space that's just open and none of the residents can park in it,
right,
seemed a little jarring. But
thank you.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So a couple of things. First of all, I'm assuming the permits will be color-coded so you could tell whether it's a resident permit or a business permit?
That is our excuse me. That's our thought during phase 1. Yes, although we're not necessarily recommending differentiating between the employee permits.
Thank you. Secondly, I think we should make clear there is no resale permit of a permit. You can't resell it if you're a resident to a Caltrain commuter, for example, for a hefty fee. Secondly, I think we should think seriously about daily passes for non-residents, in particular business scratchers. If I am a retail business in downtown Palo Alto, I want to be able to say, okay, you're going to come into work tomorrow, here's your permit that you put in your car overnight and scratch. And that's much easier than having to have floating permits for that purpose. In some sense, part of the issue of block by block or by neighborhood really deals with the fact that this is a whack-a-mole problem. And what we're trying to do is whack the moles right now that are near downtown. So if you try to basically deal with it in terms of near the downtown, you whack those moles, and then they move further away. And what we really need, if I can be crass, is we need birth control for moles, and that's through parking structures, and additional parking structures is a form of that, and TDM and TMA measures are a way of reducing the amount of moles around. In terms of the issue of please add for holidays, Labor Day, Memorial Day, and President's Day. Those things should be added. Next thing is for residential caps. Think about the number of permits being capped by the number of bedrooms minus the number of parking spaces on site plus 2. Think about that as an idea. And I'm not sure why we need visitor permits that are just unrestricted. Why can't we use scratchers for that purpose? It seems that that scratchers are daily permits, and the idea of visitors for a period of time seems a little bit silly that you can get 2 visitor permits plus 2 parking permits. That's 4. That's going to completely strip it out. So the issue is, I think, use scratchers for visitors who are there for a couple of days. And finally, I think that some lesson can be learned about the issue of how single-story overlays work. We have a system for that, and we have votes based on that. We try to figure out neighborhoods that are based on that, so we don't initially figure out what the rate is. So, for example, if you have a situation in which if you define the neighborhood size as too big, then the perimeter of that neighborhood may vote no, and thereby you won't get your 50%. But on the other hand, if you basically do it by neighborhood and collect the votes and do a color coding of where you had yes and where you had no, then it will help you determine what the neighborhood boundary should be in a post hoc basis rather than a pre hoc, ad hoc.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of geocoding the survey responses so we can see not just the percentage, but who voted yes and who voted no, where they live.
Lastly, I think that it would be worthwhile thinking about how we regularize this to handle night districts such as Crescent Park. There are other areas that might be impacted by night parking, such as even downtown North is affected by night parking from people from Menlo Park who have no overnight parking in Menlo Park, and that causes spillover in some of that area. So I think that there's some issues there. Thank you.
So I'd like to join in thanking the staff for their hard work on this program and their presentation tonight. Also for members of the public who came this evening and gave comments. I want to go back to what I think is the kind of high-level issue of attempting to modify behavior of visitors while protecting the rights and the quality of life for residents and balancing these interests. And just wonder if there's some analogy to the way, for example, health insurance is typically provided by employers as a benefit to employees. And I know in my career, in all of my jobs actually, I had parking provided. So I worked in law firms, and I had parking provided in the buildings in which the law firm had their offices, and then I worked in Silicon Valley in a company that always had parking lots surrounding the building. So I never, as an employee, was in a situation where my employer didn't provide me with parking. So I think that to the extent that that model is somewhat built into people's expectations about quality of job life as well as quality of neighborhood life, are the permits being sold to the businesses, or are they being sold directly to the employees. Because if it's sold to the business and then the business provides it to the employee, it's a deductible expense at the business level, and it's not taxable income or not an after-tax cost to the employee. And I think that that's a particularly significant effect on people's behavior. So you might want to think about selling to the businesses and having them give them as a benefit to the employees, so that the employees don't incur a tax inefficient cost, rather than buying with after-tax dollars. Likely, or the same thing comes up in terms of enforcement, and if the cost of the parking violation is borne by the employee rather than the employer, that's sort of a disconnect between your purpose. So, so the cost of the ticket and who's going to have to pay, and and so on. And finally, I think Vice Chair Keller brought up an interesting wrinkle, which I think I haven't heard described in the details of the program, which we may see when it comes back in November 12th. That you've got residents, you've got employees. What about temporary employees? What about independent contractors? What about shoppers? What about people who visit the library, who may happen to be in the downtown visiting City Hall, getting a building permit? So there are people who may need to be in the area for longer than 2 hours or whatnot, and we may want them to be there, and we want to sort of encourage those visitors, and how does that relate to the program? So with that, I think we've just about hit our expected time use exactly. If there's no one else from the public who has a need to comment, commissioners have had 2 rounds. We'll see you in November.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's just take a 5-minute intermission and come back for our next topic. Thank you. Can take their seats. We'll get on to the next item, which is a study session regarding shuttle services. And then let's begin with the staff report from Chief Transportation Official Jaime Rodriguez.
Good evening, Chair Michael, members of the Commission. Again, my name is Jaime Rodriguez. I actually have the difficult job tonight of introducing the real speakers for the evening. Ruchika Agarwal is one of our transportation engineers in our division and is the day-to-day manager of our shuttle program. She'll be giving the majority of the presentation this evening. And with us here tonight is Steve Crossley. Steve is a transportation planner with a transportation firm called Fair & Peers. And Fair & Peers conducted a independent analysis of our shuttle program for us and is provided the technical report that's included within your packet this evening. So I'm going to hand it over to Ruchika to go through the presentation, and Steve as well.
Thanks, Jaime. Good evening, Chair Michael and members of the Commission. I'm here to present the findings and the report from Fair & Peers that evaluated the existing shuttle program and also presented the market demand and other possible expansions to this shuttle program. Today we would be discussing, we'll start the discussion with the background of the shuttle program. Right now we have 3 existing routes within the city of Palo Alto and East Palo Alto. So we'll be discussing the background about those. Moving forward, we'll go ahead with the study that was conducted recently to help evaluate the program, and the main features of the study were the existing condition analysis that was done by Fair & Peers, the market assessment that was done based on the 2010 census data, and it talks about areas that has the highest potential for transit ridership, and the proposed recommendations based on the study and the market demand that we would be talking about. The 2 potential expansion to the program, the 2 routes, are the West Shuttle Route and the University Avenue Stanford Shopping Center trolley route, which we would be talking a little bit more in detail. One of the findings of the report was to conduct an on-board rider survey that the city lacks currently. We've had the shuttle program in existence for a while, but have not had a chance to collect detailed data. So staff has developed some questions, draft questions, and would like to get input from the commissioners and members of the public on those questions. And then finally, the next steps, what would be the next steps for this program to move forward? The crosstown route has been in operation since 1999. It is 100% funded by the city. It provides a north and the south connection within the Palo Alto, and it connects several popular destinations, including the Mitchell Park Library and the Community Center, the Arts Center, the main library, Midtown Shopping Center, Downtown Shopping Center, the downtown train station, and schools like the JLS and Jordan, the 2 schools. It operates only weekdays, Monday through Friday, although we do have a special school service that operates during the times when schools are in session according to the Palo Alto Unified School District's calendar. Embarcadero route is a joint collaboration with Peninsula Corridor Joint Powers Board. It is a part of the Caltrain commuter program, and it is heavily subsidized by the JPB. They pay 75% of the operating cost to run the shuttle, and the city pays the remainder 25% of that cost. It operates only during the peak periods of the day and Monday through Friday, except for some certain holidays. It connects the businesses along east of 101 with the downtown, the Palo Alto downtown Caltrain station. The East Palo Alto route is the newest addition to the shuttle program. The city partnered with City of East Palo Alto earlier this year and began operating this particular route from July 1st, 2014. It is 100% funded by the City of East Palo Alto, but is managed and operated through the City of Palo Alto. This is the only shuttle route that operates 7 days a week, and it connects the Caltrain station to the Woodland residential community in the East Palo Alto neighborhood. The existing condition analysis from the report as conducted by Fur and Pierce, it shows that the crosstown route is very popular. It's an effective route, and it has a strong demand for service from the community. It operates as a community shuttle. The current headway is approximately 1 hour, except for during the times when we are running the special school commute service. And boardings per revenue mile is a performance measure that was used to calculate how effective it is, the utilization of the shuttle. And just to give a comparison, the VTA's bus system, the average is about 2.2, and the crosstown is 2.8. So that shows a very good utilization and highly utilized service. Embarcadero route operates as a first last mile shuttle service in Palo Alto City. It is a direct route, and the main purpose of the shuttle is to provide the last mile connection for the employees who are in the east of Highway 101 business areas, connecting them to the Caltrain station. This route is coordinated with the Caltrain schedule, and thus offering it as the first and the last mile shuttle connection. And the boardings per mile is 1.4, even though the frequency is about 15 to 20 minutes headway, and it does not operate during the day, the midday from about 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The Embarcadero route also has a special Jordan run that caters to the school bell timings. For the East Palo Alto route, since it's the newest edition, we did not have any data during the analysis period, so that was not included as a part of the analysis. With this, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Crossley so he can talk about the market assessment and the market demand for the report.
Just move this over here. That's better. Maybe we just switch positions. Okay. So good evening, commissioners. I'm going to go into a couple pieces of the report that is attached to the staff report tonight. I'm also happy to answer any additional questions that you may have regarding any of the quantitative or qualitative analysis that was conducted for this service analysis. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on as a transit service analysis, and took a really critical look both at existing and proposed routing. One of the areas to look at as far as whether the service is providing utility for individuals who are most likely to use transit is an area that we developed called the Transit Likelihood Index, and that's using the EPA Smart Location Database. There's a whole host of variables from census data that we're able to combine and analyze and show through GIS mapping. And what you have up there right now is the market assessment that we conducted looking at six separate variables. One is the senior population, one is the youth population, one is zero-car households, and so that could be an indicator of transit demand for those who are transit dependent, or those who choose to not own cars or cannot drive cars. We also included population density and employment density, since we know that the higher density areas, such as downtown San Francisco, downtown Palo Alto, downtown San Jose have a higher propensity to use transit. And finally, we also included intersection density, and that's an indication of people walking and biking and using alternative modes. So areas that have a have a more dense use of intersections and closer street spacing is also an indicator. And so that's the composite that you see up there today. It's probably no surprise that the downtown Palo Alto, the Stanford University area, Midtown, California Avenue, and up towards Arrasodero and Gunn High School, as well as South Palo Alto, are higher transit likelihood than the rest of the city, which is areas with such as single-family dwelling units. There's another map that's in your staff report that we don't have up here today that just looks at senior population, and that's also an indicator. Again, we can kind of skin this cat a whole bunch of different ways, but this was we determined for Palo Alto in this unique context to be an indicator of transit likelihood. And we took those routes that are existing, and also we looked at the routes that are proposed and to see if those routes would serve these areas that have high transit likelihood. The recommendations that came out of the study, there are actually a number in there, and we submitted recommendations, and it was up to city staff to determine which of those were were feasible both financially and operationally. And for the crosstown route, we found that the route itself has very strong demand throughout the entire day. And there's also very strong midday demand. Obviously, the school runs have high ridership. We also found that a couple of the other runs that are not specifically school runs also have very high ridership on the fringes of those school runs. So we did propose in our report to test an increase of the frequency during the midday period, which would provide increased mobility to seniors and other individuals who choose not to drive and want to access the different key destinations along the crosstown route. Another area that we looked at was providing better service that would coordinate better with Caltrain, potentially adding some runs. But the 30-minute service during the midday period would provide that additional mobility. We did include in the report some information on service elasticity, and that is when you increase service frequency or decrease service frequency, how much you would expect the ridership to increase. And the literature that we reviewed, and this is from the Transit Capacity Research Manual, shows that we would expect somewhere between a 40% or a 60% increase in ridership by doubling the service frequency. So the elasticity is roughly 0.5, between 0.4 and 0.6. So if we increase service by 100%, essentially going from a 60-minute service frequency to a 30-minute service frequency, you'd expect a commensurate increase in ridership. Not a 100% increase in ridership, but in the 40 to 60% range. We also took a look at the route itself and concluded that Ruchika and her staff have very adequately addressed the key destinations along that route, both looking at schools, looking at senior populations, looking at libraries. It serves Mitchell Park Library as well as the main library and goes into downtown and serves Caltrain. That route itself does serve those populations quite well. We wouldn't recommend any changes to the route itself, but looking at modifying service frequencies to enhance mobility and improve ridership along that route. For the Embarcadero shuttle, there were no changes that were recommended at this time. I want to take a moment to talk about the satellite parking lot that is potentially going to be created in the East Bayshore area. And we did find that there's some bidirectional. It's a last mile service in the morning from Caltrain, but we did find that there is demand as a first mile service as well, coming up Embarcadero through the Old Palo Alto and to Caltrain station. So there actually is a bidirectional demand along that route. As far as the Embarcadero satellite parking lot, I believe there's something in the range of 130 parking spaces proposed along there. We did a capacity analysis and determined that the seated capacity on the shuttle itself, on the different runs that are provided throughout the morning and the afternoon period, that the city would not need to increase the number of buses, so it would not need to increase the cost to the city or to JPB to adequately serve that population that would be parking at the satellite parking facility. The service is provided between 15 and 20-minute headways, which is fairly frequent, obviously much more frequent than the crosstown service. And so we feel that at this time, obviously, actual implementation could prove different, but at this time, based upon the information that we have, we feel that the Embarcadero service could adequately serve that satellite parking lot without increasing the number of buses in operation. The East Palo Alto shuttle, the data is still coming in on that. Again, it is funded by East Palo Alto, operated here by the City of Palo Alto. Obviously, more data, once the ridership information comes in and once a survey is conducted, can determine if any additional changes are needed to that route. But right now, it looks like the route is operating effectively, and I think further data would prove that if there's any changes needed. The West, and now looking into the two proposed routes, we took a very critical look at the West Shuttle, had a lot of conversations with city staff on the purpose of the West Shuttle, the coordination with potentially the tech sector in Mountain View, as well as the need of Palo Alto residents. And we did an analysis, I believe I'm seeing in front of me right here, analysis of the schedule. Found some anomalies, but that would easily be figured out when MV Transportation starts further optimizing their schedule. And so we have some recommendations in there just to make sure that there's enough recovery time to satisfy the headways that are being proposed for this route, but also just the purpose of the route itself and providing a express service in the morning from Palo Alto to Mountain View, to the Google campus area, but also providing a local service back into Palo Alto and then the reverse in the PM. And understanding that the outreach that was done in 2011, looking at South Palo Alto and looking at the needs of the residents there, including the senior community, the West Shuttle route would provide a very direct service from South Palo Alto down along the El Camino corridor to the different destinations along El Camino, including the Palo Alto Medical Facility, Sanford Shopping Center, and Caltrain. And again, we took a critical look at the routing itself and found that it really does serve the populations that are currently not being served by Crosstown. But in addition to the Crosstown population, it provides a direct connection between South Palo Alto and the El Camino corridor and downtown Palo Alto. The University Avenue Stanford Shopping Center trolley, that was one that we took a look at as far as headway and number of buses in operation. We took a look at the route. Our experience with lunchtime shopping and dining shuttles is that due to the amount of time that an individual has for lunch, we were looking at a lower or a better service frequency than the 20 minutes that was proposed by the city. We were recommending a 10-minute service frequency. We were thinking about the indication of if you have a 20-minute service frequency, which was the original proposal, you had to maybe wait a few minutes for that bus and walk a few minutes to your destination, either to or from the bus to your destination. That could end up taking up most of your lunch hour. So we actually ended up recommending a service that would either be two buses operating at 10-minute headways or shortening the route itself to allow that single bus, keeping the cost the same and allowing that to operate at a 10-minute headway, which would greatly reduce the overall time, the walking time, the wait time, and the travel time for that individual, and provide a much more practical use for that shuttle during the lunchtime. Another area that we looked at, and this is based upon the experience that we have with shopping type shuttles, was to also consider operating the shuttle during the holiday period, allowing individuals who are shopping at Sanford Shopping Center to park once and then travel to University and shop there and back, as opposed to having to get in their car and park twice. Just heard a discussion about the residential permanent parking district down here and how impacted the parking is, and that could potentially alleviate some of the parking shortages, especially that occurred during the holiday period. So that's another recommendation we looked at, was also looking at potential for a trial run during the holiday period as well. And with that concludes the summary of the analysis that we did, both on existing and proposed conditions. There's definitely a lot more information in the staff report, but also wanted to open that up for any questions that you may have, and very happy to answer any questions, and obviously very happy to be here tonight. Oh, I had another slide up there, which was the routes themselves. I know you have that in your draft packet, and Ruchika can take over for me from here.
Thank you, Steve. So here, the next slide that you see, this is the route map that the city had during the RFP process earlier this year. The maps, the routes that you see in blue, that's the current Embarcadero shuttle route, and the solid green is the existing crosstown route. The one in yellow is what we proposed at the time and is in existence and is in operation now is the East Palo Alto route. The majority of the discussion that we're having today about the West shuttle route is highlighted in the red, and as Steve mentioned, it's proposed to operate as a commuter shuttle express during the peak periods in the morning and in the afternoons, and as a community shuttle during the hours of about 10 to 3 during the midday hours. And the extension of that route that's highlighted in the orange is the one that would lead to the Shoreline Business Park during the peak periods. The other route that's highlighted kind of in brown is the proposed East Bay route that the city had included in the RFP, but we did not receive any bids, so staff at this time is not recommending implementing or adding that route to the shuttle system. Talking a little bit about the survey, with the packet, you guys received a draft questions about the survey. Staff realized that is a little bit of a lengthy survey with 20 questions, so we've revised it in the last couple of days, and the one that was kept at places this evening is a shortened version of the on-board rider survey. The idea or the main characteristics of the survey is to gather information about the rider and about the purpose of the trip and what is their experience of the shuttle service so far, and how can the city improve upon that. Along with the questions, we would also provide an opportunity for the rider to provide any additional comments or concerns or complaints. And primarily, we would have this survey in a hard copy format, just because we are targeting people who are already using the existing shuttle program. So the idea is to board the buses and hand over the shuttle and have the riders fill out the survey while the staff is in the city in the shuttle. I'm sorry. So staff is looking for some feedback from the commissioners and from members of the public about the survey as well. The next steps for this is we do plan to conduct the survey in the next coming weeks. We'll have it open till the end of October and have the analysis or have the information recorded and analyze the information received during the survey and present the findings of this report and the survey to City Council at some time in November. That concludes the presentation, and staff is happy to hear your comments or answer any questions. Thank you.
So thank you very much for the presentation and for your work on this. Before we bring this back to the Commission for questions and comments, let's open the public hearing, and I think Vice Chair Keller has some people here tonight who submitted speaker cards.
Yes, we have so far 3 speakers, and it's a little hard to read this, but I think it's Jarris, thank you. You'll have 3 minutes to be followed by Alice McGrath. Sure.
Hello, we're pleased to be able to address you, Commissioners. I'm Jo Jarris. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm supervisor of social services at Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired in Palo Alto. Our agency is a nonprofit that's been in Palo Alto for 80 years, under many different names, starting with the Palo Alto Society for the Blind. We serve about 2,500 clients a year, and our goal is to help them to become independent when they're living with vision loss and blindness, to help them to be safe, and also to help them have the best quality of life, and hopefully even to get employed. And we have done that with a number of our clients at our center. Our block is being torn down in a couple of months. We are at 2470 El Camino right now between Page Mill and California, and we will be having to move temporarily for several years to the Stanford Research Park, and we'll be at 3200 Hillview Avenue at the corner of Porter and Hillview. Our boxes are packing and we're leaving on Friday, and everything was looking hunky-dory. And Sharon, two people behind me here, had trained all of our support group clients, all of the other clients from various classes that wanted to get to our new center to ride the V line that the Marguerite had at California Avenue in El Camino. But unfortunately, we discovered last Friday or Thursday that the V line has been discontinued. So right at the moment, the transportation that exists is all during commute hours only. There's a 5-hour gap there, so we have a lot of people who come to support groups and classes during the day and would be marooned at our new center. And we had loaded buses with 20 clients, Spanish-speaking support group, and we have seniors in our support group who take the buses because we train them to do that. And we also had about 10 or 15, I guess 15 people from our Spanish-speaking support group were all going to take buses and get over on the V line. So we're in a quandary at the moment. And we're trying to figure out if there's any way that the Palo Alto shuttle could help us to ferry people between California Avenue and El Camino and our destination, which is 3200 Hillview, which is only about a 3-minute drive, and kind of it's not on El Camino, but it's our staff will talk to where there might be a jog that you could take to help our clients out, because they come and go all day long. They use our store. They come to our low vision clinic. They come for individual counseling. They come for computer classes. They come for support groups, nutrition classes, and training on using the cane and learning to be safe and independent walking, and for all kinds of classes. So thank you.
Looking for the mic. Oh, the microphone. I'm sorry, the microphone's right.
Good evening. My name is Alice McGrath, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Joe Jaros mentioned, really what we are seeking input on and assistance is to be able to look to the Palo Alto shuttle to assist us with that period of time between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And for the most part, that is the majority of our operating hours for which we serve our clients. The commute hours in the morning, we do have several employees who are blind who work at our agency and who also volunteer regularly. We can kind of work it out in the fact that there are the commute hours that are being served by another shuttle through the Marguerite. But it is that period of time for which when we are working and serving our clients, that once an individual comes to our agency, there is no way for them to leave during that period of time. It's dramatic in the fact that we are going to be over in this new location for 2+ years. And what that means is that as an agency for the blind, and I was listening to the report, and we were talking about individuals who need and require public transportation. And I would say that the disabled population, I heard seniors, and I didn't hear disabled, but maybe it was embedded in the written information, and I didn't have access to that. But this is a population that not only needs public transportation, but requires it. So we are looking here for assistance for that route during that period of time. For even if it is 3 or 4 times during that period, we would be better served not only for our employees, but then also for the clients for which we serve. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Sharon Hudson.
Hi. I'm a orientation mobility instructor, and I am someone who does teach people to take buses, to get around, to be independent. And unfortunately, I trained about 50 people how to take the bus from California and El Camino over to the new site, to only find out 2 weeks ago the route got canceled by the Marguerite. So I am hoping, we are sort of pleading to you, to look to you to help us. And I was looking at the route that you have, and I was wondering if there just could be a loop up. You go along El Camino, if you could just go up Page Mill, loop around Hanover or Porter, Hanover, and come back down, it would only be about 2 miles, a 2-mile loop, and shouldn't take that much out of your route, and it would make a tremendous difference to our clients. And we serve about 2,500, now, not all in this one site, but we serve 2,500 people a year, and a lot of them do need to get to the Palo Alto office. So I would like you to consider that, and I'm just laying that before you. Thank you.
So I think Vice Chair Keller has a question for one of the speakers.
Yes. No, I understand that the 89 bus, which goes near there, only runs in the morning from Caltrain to near there, and then on the reverse direction in the for the late afternoon commute. And so one of the things I'm wondering is, do you have an idea how many people per day are being served? I'm wondering whether there's something that the VTA could do to provide service there. I'm not sure.
We haven't. We're approaching different avenues. Since this just came up this last week, we're approaching VTA. We're approaching you. We're approaching the VA hospital that has a shuttle that runs from the VA hospital in Palo Alto to the VA hospital in Menlo Park. But it's right now we have no way of getting people between 10 and 3. Basically, people are trapped. And I noticed in your study you had the V line in there, and unfortunately it has discontinued. But if you wish to make sure you're serving people who cannot drive, this is definitely a population that needs public transportation.
And have you also approached Stanford with respect to whether they're willing to continue the B shuttle while this is going on?
They are not. We were approached. The funding for that was through Stanford Hospital, and Stanford Hospital does not wish to continue funding that. They are changing their funding from a shuttle from Stanford Hospital directly to the VA hospital, but that's along Foothill Expressway. So it does not come along the El Camino or connect with all the other bus routes.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
May I just answer? We figured at least 80 people a month, some of them daily and some of them not daily. So 9 of them are employees or volunteers that work in our center regularly.
So how many people a day would you say? About 10, 20, 30?
Well, our store serves any number of people a day, and at least 3 or 4 walk into the store. We have clinics, we have support groups, 3 or 4 support groups a month. What would you say? 15 and 20 a day, she's guessing.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for your appearance tonight and to sensitize us to a very important issue. And I see that the staff has taken careful note of that, and hopefully you'll get some satisfaction from your work. Yes.
Can I make one comment? They were going to put out a survey. Do they have any way of surveying the disabled, because the visually impaired are not going to be able to read their survey? So I just want them to be a little conscious of that.
So perhaps staff would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair Michael. As of right now, what we're proposing with the survey, depending on your feedback, is actually for it to be an onboard survey. We're actually envisioning someone from a city staff actually being on the shuttle, asking people the questions directly and taking down their responses. So in this particular case, even though we don't have it in Braille or other form, I think that we'll be able to provide audible questions and receive those verbally back.
That's great. Thank you.
So if I can just follow up on that, one of the things that occurs to me could be a challenge is to do a survey of people who didn't make it on board, who need to use transit in some form, but weren't served by transit or couldn't access transit. So, are you able to expand the survey to have some data or estimate of people who would be in that category?
Thank you, Chair Michael. There's definitely a lot of ways for which we could distribute a survey, even as an online form, say as a SurveyMonkey tool. We actually did attempt to try and get some of that information as part of the citywide transportation survey that we did about a year ago. You would recall that we came to the Commission to solicit your input on the design of that survey. And what we've envisioned is trying to focus that that citywide transportation survey every year in a different focus area. If there's a little bit more interest regarding the Commission's part on transit-specific focus information, we plan on returning with a new version of that citywide transportation survey to you sometime later this year. And at that point, we could develop some questions between now and then around that focus area, and that would be one method for which we could do it. We had the same thought with this transportation survey. You know, we try to be very broad at the beginning in the report that went to you in your packet. And again, that was about 20 questions. It's a long survey. It's too long of a survey to expect someone to answer questions for you on a shuttle, so we tried tapering that down. But again, the same concept. We could do broad the first year. The second year, we could try and change it and have a different audience, people that aren't on the bus. But to try and be efficient, we want to get something moving forward right away and then adapt every year depending on the interest.
Okay, I bet the Commission has some questions or comments based on the report. Commissioner Rosenblum.
Yeah, thank you for the report. My first question is pretty basic. What is the incremental cost of the program that was proposed? I couldn't find the breakdown or even just the overall number.
To increase the crosstown shuttle, let me clarify if I understood this right. Are you asking about what would be the increased cost in order?
Correct.
Okay. So for crosstown shuttle, we are expecting about $7,000 a month if we increase the headway to 30 minutes between the hours of between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. The west shuttle route, the approximate operating cost to operate 2 shuttles throughout the day was about $400,000 a year.
Okay.
And
that includes, presumably, you're purchasing additional shuttles. Is that inclusive of all costs, or is it just ongoing operational costs?
So city doesn't own the shuttles. We contract out the services to operate the shuttle. The current contractor is MV Transportation, and that's the estimate for the west shuttle route if we use 2 shuttle vehicles throughout the day.
Okay.
And for the Stanford trolley shuttle or trolley route, the estimate is about $20,000 per month for service between 11 to 1 for about a 2-hour service weekdays.
If I could just provide some additional information, just to help you gauge the cost of a shuttle program, we use a round figure of about $200,000 per bus per year. So that's the rough magnitude cost of a shuttle program. So again, the crosstown shuttle, if you have 2 buses, it's about a $400,000 a year program.
I see. And my additional questions, some of the data seemed a little bit contradictory versus some of the recommendations. So the capacity utilization was off the charts for just the Caltrain linked routes going cross town. So you had a couple that were, the only ones that were above seating capacity was the early morning Bullet train interfacing shuttle and the 3:20 p.m. to hit the northbound and then later southbound Bullet in the afternoon. But the recommendations are to increase the frequency in the middle of the day, which I understand the rationale for that. But if one of our goals is to make, to get cars off the street and make it more convenient, I would have thought that there would have been a recommendation to increase frequency around those Bullet interfaces that seem to be heavily used, number one, and I'll put these in 2 parts. And the other, given that the Caltrain effect seems so large, I was interested that there's not a lot of emphasis around Cal Ave, and I recognize the West Shuttle will go through, but there's a large amount of traffic to Cal Ave that's going into Stanford Research Park that's going along a different axis from the proposed route. And I'm wondering if it was the fact that that's already served by VTA or other options that it wasn't considered, or if the density calculation you're using for employment density in the map that you used discounts HP or VMware or others because it's one building surrounded by forest or cars or something else, and that the density calculation is not an accurate reflection of the fact that there's a lot of people sitting in one building surrounded by non-dense areas. So the 2 areas that I was curious about is first, whether or not there was a push to recommend additional services interfacing with Bullets on the routes that are oversubscribed, and second, additional routes along the Cal Ave access into Stanford Research Park and other areas.
Yeah, I'll take a quick stab, Steve, and then I'll look for you some help. So I think that we are, with the proposal for the west route, specifically trying to address that kind of what I'll call the gap and trying to provide a bridge out towards the California Avenue Business District area. One of the things we specifically tried to design with that route was a bridge into the California Avenue area that really doesn't exist today. It does exist with routes, along El Camino Real coming in from Mountain View, through the BTA route, but not specifically from South Palo Alto and areas trying to get into that area. One of the things to keep in mind is in the California Avenue area, there is no Bullet Express service from Caltrain. It does only come into the Caltrain University area, and then if I remember correctly, it's then 3 stations down in Mountain View. And so that was one of the reasons why you see a little bit of a less of a link for those kind of high priority routes. But we agree that there needs to be a link just in general, and that is a link that is today currently not existing within the Palo Alto Shuttle program. Within the California Avenue, within the Research Park area of Stanford, they do actually have a fairly robust network of shuttles that come from the Marguerite program, and we really tried to be balanced within the program. You want to provide overlap and redundancy, but you also don't want to compete with other services. That is counterproductive from the standpoint of transit services for the larger community. And so the routes, I think, that we developed tried to balance out that need between where there's kind of gaps in service regarding also not competing with revenue-based type services like that from the VTA. And so all the routes that you're seeing here were coordinated with Stanford, they were coordinated with the VTA, and we outreached to transit providers to make sure that we were going to be kind of complementary and not competing services. Steve, got any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree everything that Jaime said, and also I wanted to point out with the crosstown route, there is the route in the morning that is actually higher than the designated school run as far as boardings. One thing that we would desire and the city is pursuing is looking at the ridership survey, which would understand where people are coming from and going to and what their destination is, be it Caltrain, be it the library, be it school, as well as another area that we would like to have as far as providing the information that you're looking for is what's demand at Caltrain is a stop level ridership survey to understand exactly how much ridership is occurring at each stop. We did have ridership from each run. So we have the total ridership inbound and outbound on crosstown, but we don't exactly have the ridership at each stop. That would enable us to understand if that run that has higher boardings than the designated school run is being served more by students, or if there is a demand to Caltrain and Baby Bullet. And we did flag that again. There's obviously a process of financial constraints and looking at what the best avenue to increase service and where where those revenues can go to, but we would consider increasing that service to Caltrain if it does play out that the demand actually is to that Baby Bullet service. There are a number of Baby Bullet trains that are not being served by crosstown. It's simply an hourly service, which doesn't necessarily provide that frequent connection for the choice rider, but I think with more data that would be coming forth in the next couple of months, I think we can better answer that question that you have.
So just in terms of the cost benefit of what you laid out, so the cost data is really helpful to me. Just my gut is, in addition to the previous comments, that it seems like there's certain oversubscribed routes that did not seem to me to be emphasized. I am very skeptical of the downtown to Stanford Shopping Center utility and why, and especially given the cost, but I'll leave it to my other colleagues to probe further. Thank you.
Commissioner Gardias.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand that there will be more data coming up, right? So you already answered part of my question, but I still would like to just have some preliminary numbers, right? So building on my colleague's question, what would be the incremental cost per rider if we extend these routes?
So the incremental cost per rider. So right now the service is free. So we would take the total cost of the service and divide that by the number of riders, so the total cost of service per month. Obviously, we don't know what the ridership increase would be. We can we can extrapolate that. We can suggest that there may be, we would suggest during the midday period there'd be a 40% increase in ridership. We can calculate that number and we could get back to you on what we think the cost per rider could be. I did want to point out that compared to other shuttle services, the crosstown route is performing quite well. Earlier this year, we performed a service analysis for the Emory Go-Around. It is one of the most successful first mile, last mile shuttle services in the country. Was actually recently featured on NPR as far as being a very successful system. And one of their issues that they had was they had too much ridership. They were actually having capacity issues. And we tried to look at improvements to their service to provide better capacity and serve new markets. They're performing quite well, and the crosstown is slightly below that. So we would expect that the cost per rider would be very effective as far as providing new service. Again, we won't know that until the service is actually implemented, and we can calculate that. Right now we can project, and we can provide you with those projections if you would like them.
Right, I understand. So thank you. But so I think that, and we already asked about this in some of our discussions, right, that some financial projections, top level should be a part of each package, and then they should tighten down as we are closer to the release time or to the start of the service, right? So of course, right, some projections, some estimate would be beneficial here. You gave us $7,000 incremental per line, I believe, right? And then you have in your package that has a 40% increment upon the increase of the service to the twice of the current rate, right? So based on this, you could just provide the numbers to us, right? So that's number one. So this is the question. So please provide the next time when we meet. Please just give us some projections. Would be good to understand how much it's going to cost, right, from different perspective, right? The second question is right. This. I mean, you provide the statement, and you also said this that there's based on the increase of the service, the elasticity is very high. It's about 40%, or you said that even 60%, right? So that is very encouraging. But what we would like to maybe know, where this 40 or 60% increase would come from, right? Are we gonna lure people that would stay home to the buses and just bring them to the downtown and they will have good time spending their money, or we're going to exchange bike ridership onto the bus ridership, right? So if you could just also just give us some comparison, what would be where this 40% or 60% increase, where it would come from? Which segments of the population, which segments of the other riders, right, or non-riders?
Absolutely, and actually, I have a report here I could actually leave with you, a TCRP report, which is actually talks about elasticities, and service frequency is just one elasticity. So fare, the cost to ride, is also another elasticity that's considered in transit practice. And essentially, because you're providing more frequent service, you are attracting those individuals. Unfortunately, I can't speak right now for who those individuals would be, but for those who are not taking transit because it's currently an hourly service, does not mesh up well with their schedules, or they could potentially walk or bike or drive faster to their destination. It's a body of research that looks at a whole different set of transit systems and how increasing transit simply attracts more individuals. That similarly, when you increase the fare, transit agencies, although here the example is, let's say VTA or Samtrans, which would increase the fare, they can accurately predict how many fewer riders would ride their service if they increase their fare, because they know that there's a lower demand, obviously, when the cost goes up. And so this is a body of research. Again, it's averages, and there's different elasticities for every different service. And I'd be happy to leave you with this report if you want to take a quick look at it. It has a whole bunch of different services. It has rail and express bus, community service. So, and that's where we're getting that information from.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that, right, this reference, right? But if you don't mind, we would be interested probably in more Palo Alto local perspective that may be from other municipalities or maybe statewide. I don't know the source. But if you could just take a look at our data, our population, and just provide us with the segments, right? that would be good. Can I ask another question, or it's going to go to the second
Commissioner
round?
Gardias, I just wanted to do a quick follow-up in that. So, we're very fortunate, given that the cross-town route is rather focused within our community. We have a relatively good sense of where kind of riders are coming from because we're hitting a lot of the specific senior housing facilities within the community. We're servicing very specific business parks. I think where we lack in data is the data point that Richard mentioned earlier, where we kind of lack the boarding specific location and deboarding specific data. I think in combination with the onboard survey, we'll be able to collect a lot of the information that you're interested in hearing. And so it's definitely an interest of ours, and I think we can return next time with more data that I think will answer your question.
Yes, I mean, the purpose of this question and this ask was pretty much just to, like in the other discussion, right, to understand how this is going to affect our other programs, right? And you're very active in the bike ridership, right? So, and I hope that this program is not going to impact the other one, right? So all those programs should work together. So by just giving us the data, right, about all the riderships, right, this could help us to understand the impact on the other programs as well. And then if I can just very quickly, right, I know that I'm over my limit, so I try to be brief, right? So looking at the proposed routes on, it was on your last slide, right? I would like to understand, right, being myself a city boy and just grew up around the public transportation, which was pretty much, part of my life, and bus ridership, it just was an adventure pretty much, where the discussions were held, friendships being started and so forth, right? But then it was based on a little bit different concept of the combined transportation, which I would like to understand how this network of the buses combines or intertwines with the other transportation means, right? So it was, we talk about the example of the Margaret bus that was canceled, right? Then this society in Palo Alto suffered because of this. It is because apparently there is no other route, right? In the network of the transportation systems, right? If one system is off the grid, is it either a tram or a bus, right? There is another one that would be replaced at the same time, so they go in parallel, right, in the transportation corridor. So if you could just talk about how this map relates to other transportation means, or maybe you could just give us, for the next meeting, some understanding, right, how this overlaps to other towns' transportations, Margaret system and so forth. Thank you.
Commissioner Alchek?
Well, a number of the comments that have been made a number of the comments have been made, I sort of second. The one sort of discussion about this west route, I guess there was a part of me that envisioned that, that we would really see suggestions that served as potential alternatives for arriving at work, and maybe that's too big an ask for the city of Palo Alto to sort of manage, because maybe the majority of our so it's like the westbound suggestion is really a route for residents to kind of access retail and downtown-oriented areas, right? As opposed to there being a solution that served like a second purpose, which would be theoretically serving as a sort of commute route. And there was a part of me that was hoping to see some, I guess there's sort of a disconnect between that notion that the west route sort of connects. Here, I'll read it to you. That the proposed West Shuttle would connect South Palo Alto with the business and retail districts in North Palo Alto, and then this sort of suggestion that maybe the larger employers like Google or the Shoreline Business Park would be sort of interested in it. I'm a little unclear on how that route serves sort of two different purposes, if you will.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll check. Let me try and respond. And again, I might look to both Richard and Steve for some help. We really tried to be out of the box when it came to the development of the West Route. I mean, shuttle programs are significantly expensive, and when you offer a free shuttle program to a community, you get no money back, but you get benefit back to the community enjoys, and offering a mode that they would not otherwise have, and reduce other kind of mode for peaks as well. With the West Route, we really tried to do three different things, and I think they're all things that just don't exist within the community today. So again, the concept of the West Route is it's mostly the route in red, but the concept is that during the morning peak, there's really only about 5 or 6 stops that the route actually takes. So it probably kind of like a baby bullet on the Caltrain. It skips about every 3rd or 4th shuttle stop, and it just does target locations where it can pick up people that are trying to get out to the business park. And in the morning, it would follow that route in orange, and then those same stops would be available for people that live in Palo Alto trying to get to Caltrain that they would have no otherwise connection except to drive or bike in some instances to get to that location. So that was the first thing we tried to do, is kind of focus it to more of a commute-focused service, because we thought that competed less with the rapid bus service the VTA was offering in the morning along El Camino Real. We thought that was kind of complementary but not competitive. But one of the things that we also introduced was we recognized in Palo Alto the most popular element of our community is the student mode. They use the shuttle the absolute most in the peak periods of the day. And so what we probably labeled in the wrong color here, but you see that green dash line in the middle? That's a spur of one of the buses coming back from the Mountain View Business Park in the morning to try and offer a route for kids that go to Palo Alto High School but that live south of Oregon. So again, if you're familiar with the community, crossing Oregon can be an experience in itself and can be a deterrent for students that say want to bike but don't, so they like are getting driven to school. So we're introducing as a second mode a brand new school-focused route that does not exist today. And then lastly, the third element was more of this community concept, which kind of happened just by chance, mirror some of the recommendations that Baron Peers is making for the Crosstown Shuttle to have a focused service in the morning. The route, as we show from the morning in red to orange to Mountain View, is about an hour and 15 minutes. But if we could have 2 shuttles, it would offer a round trip just in red in the morning at about a 35-minute headway, which is now also happens to be complementary to the recommendation that Baron Peers made for Crosstown. So we're trying to do a lot with a little bit amount of money and resources to offer benefit to the community. And so, my only thought there is that we are trying to do all those things with the West Route. And so, if it wasn't coming clear within the report, I apologize. But thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
So just to be clear, is that morning and PM route, is that serving as a service for Google employees to get to their campus from the train station? Or is that for Palo Alto residents who work at Google to get to Google? I guess I'm trying to figure out who is that?
It's all of those. To answer your question, Commissioner Alchek, we had done some preliminary discussions out to some of the companies out in the research park. We had spoken to Google. We'd spoken to Intuit, if I remember correctly. And so, we had an understanding of that there was some demand from Palo Alto residents trying to get out there. But we also understood that for the people that were living outside of Palo Alto, they're coming here from Caltrain, from the People Express routes, and so that those little bridge connections were picking up people along the way. But again, what doesn't exist today through existing routes like for Google on their own is that they don't make that bus available for on the way back to the station to pick up local residents to the station itself, and that's what this would introduce.
So is the notion, like I'm envisioning a San Francisco resident riding down and jumping on that shuttle to get to the Google campus. So is the partnership vision that Google would contribute, significant funds to help fund not just that AM, PM portion, but potentially sort of a larger part of the whole West shuttle? Is that the idea that
That is the
sort of
exact
selling
idea.
this small portion and then helping fund?
We of course have not had any financial discussions with any of the companies directly to that degree.
I think that's very creative.
Yes.
Okay. The second thing I wanted to say, and this may be just because we're following the RPP discussion, but I know the hours for the suggested trolley wouldn't necessarily apply here, but my first thought when we talked about this University Stanford Mall trolley was, I mean, I imagine weekday parking at Stanford Mall's parking lots is pretty low. I could easily see people parking for free at Stanford Mall and hopping on a shuttle to downtown Palo Alto. Arguably, the hours here from 11 to 1:30 during the summer aren't really applicable. But if the hours were broadened, and I only mention this because, again, our city has sort of a vested interest in finding more parking. And if the mall's lots are I know this is a side discussion, relatively empty during the weekdays, not just in the summer. That sort of stood out to me as a potential ridership for this trolley. So this isn't just about people who happen to have a really extended amount of time set aside for shopping. This theoretically could have broader appeal. Maybe there's no partner there at Stanford for that, but it's worth noting.
Commissioner Tanaka?
Yeah, so let me just say that I appreciate staff putting this together. I think overall it looks like the West Shuttle proposal makes a lot of sense. So I think, good job in that. I guess in terms of the schedule, I noticed like the Cal Ave is skipped. And so I think one of my fellow commissioners also mentioned, I think it's actually important to stop at the Caltrain stations because I think it'll pick up a lot of ridership there. Unless I'm misreading this schedule, but it looks like in the morning the Cal Ave station is skipped. And I was kind of maybe puzzled why that is, and maybe staff could talk about why would you skip the Caltrain station?
Thank you, Commissioner Tanaka. The reason we had originally proposed to skip the Cal Lab station is because we were trying to align with the Baby Bullet schedule. And I think to Steve's point, he mentions that he thought we could definitely do a better job of that. And I agree. This is a first step kind of cut of trying to develop a schedule. But hey, if there's interest in potentially bringing that back as a stop even in the mornings for people that aren't necessarily interested in a Bullet Express run, but just a Caltrain connection in general, that's the feedback we want tonight.
Okay. Well, I just noticed it was skipped in the morning on the southbound, and then a northbound it skipped in the evening, which I guess I was trying to understand what was the rationale behind that. So on the northbound it skipped in the evening, right, on the Cal Ave station?
Yeah, I think we'll have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay, I didn't quite understand why you would do that, but okay, it sounds like you're looking into it. And then I was wondering, do the shuttles today, do they actually count how many people ride or board each time at each stop or get off? Do we have that data?
Thank you, Commissioner Tanaka. No, at this time we don't have a specific stop-to-stop data. The information that the drivers provide us today is the total number of boardings throughout the run. So if the shuttle leaves at 7:30 from the Caltrain station and the same shuttle comes back, if the run is southbound starting at Caltrain station and it ends at Stevenson House in southern part of the town, we have that the maximum number of riders that were in that particular run. But we don't have how many riders got on at what location and how many got off at what location.
Okay. I think it would actually be, if it's easy to get, I think it'd be good to get that kind of data. That way you know which stops are really important, which stops you could maybe stop going to. Or when you go there. That way it's a little bit more data driven. I think the other thing, and maybe this is easier to get, is do you guys look at the Google Transit data in terms of, okay, so you guys looked at that and factored that into the, okay, great. And then, yeah, I think that the private public partnership makes a lot of sense. I know that at the Castro station, Google funds a shuttle that goes from the Castro station in Mountain View to its campus. And it's open to the public to take as well. So I think it's a good idea, and that's maybe one way to fund this program. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and there's a precedence for it happening already. So good thinking.
Vice Chair Keller.
So let me start where Commissioner Tanaka left off. The main reason that it's unnecessary to stop at the Caltrain station at California Avenue is because during rush hours there's 1 or 2 Caltrain runs that stop there, and every train that stops at the Caltrain at California Avenue also stops at University Avenue. So at University Avenue there are typically 4 or 5 trains stopping per hour. So it's superfluous until there's a change in the schedule because of electrification. I am not sure, but when I checked a while ago, the Palo Alto shuttles weren't on Google Transit, so you couldn't actually figure out if you said I want to go from point A to point B, they didn't show up. Maybe that's been changed recently, so that would be good. The next thing is that with respect to slide 7, there's a big brown area in Research Park, and there's a big brown area in East Bayshore on California. I mean on Embarcadero Road, and that tells me that you might not have properly taken into account transit-oriented jobs. And so it would be helpful to have a heat map that not only takes into account residences but also jobs. And I would expect that more of the area might be transit-friendly with jobs orientation than just housing orientation. So the next thing is would be nice if the contract for shuttles also required that the shuttles be alternative fuel in some way, either natural gas or electric or something like that, so to reduce use. The next thing is, in terms of the crosstown shuttle, can think about expanding the hours. If you're going to do it in the middle, then you could expand the hours somewhat to the shoulder hours. Right now, they don't go as much into the commute hours. And if you actually have increased service in the middle of the day, you could have it go one shuttle start earlier and one shuttle continue later, and thereby, without much increased cost, deal with the shoulder hours. I think that North Bayshore of Mountain View is not only Google. There's a whole bunch of employers there. And in particular, there's a big push there to limit the number of cars in that area as it expands. And therefore, there might be additional partners that may wish to participate than just Google in terms of that. And I believe that they have a desire to have the mode share shift of about 35 or 40%, if I remember correctly. So that's a significant amount for which this can be a contribution, just as the bike bridge over 101 and Adobe Creek is part of their mode share calculations. Okay, now a few more specific things. Firstly, it would be nice to, when you're getting to also have historical data of when Palo Alto joined the VTA in 1972, I believe it was, we had a whole bunch of routes, 82, 83, 82, 84, 86, 88. It'd be nice to get maps of those and understand what those were like. And right now, the only one we have left is the 88, but I remember the 84 and the 86. Anyway, the other thing is it would be nice to start doing on and off counts. So a lot of bus agencies, when you get on the bus, somebody clicks on. When you get off the bus, somebody clicks off. It's easy to have the driver do that, and then you'll get more detailed count data. I'm not sure whether it's worthwhile asking the question, if you didn't take the shuttle, would you drive instead? Or how would you get to your destination instead? I don't want to add more questions, but that's something to think about. Suggestions for shuttle specific things. One of the issues we have now is the route sort of partly duplicates the 22 and 522 buses along El Camino. And that makes it ineligible for Bay Area Air Quality Management District grants. On the other hand, if the shuttle ran along Park Boulevard, from East Meadow down to Park Boulevard, you may have to jog over to Wilkie Way to get back because of the blockage there. But if it basically went on Park Boulevard and then down California Avenue, you'd serve the California Avenue Business District, and you'd also make it possibly more eligible for BACMed, BAAQMD grants, because it would no longer duplicate the 22 and 522 to as large of an extent as it does now. So that's a thing to consider. I understand the East Palo Alto shuttle not only serves people from East Palo Alto who are working, who are taking Caltrain, but one of the things it also serves because of the stop at Woodland, it also serves University Circle. And that's why we find the usage would be good in both directions, because people going from Caltrain to University Circle would also be using it, and that's a useful feature. Let's see if there's anything else. No, I think that's basically it. Thank you. Thank you very much for the job well done.
Vice Chair Keller, if I may, I just wanted, for the benefit of people that may be watching at home that couldn't see me nodding to you in some of your comments, I just did want to note for people at home that the Palo Alto shuttle program is available on Google Maps, so you can plan your route using Google for taking advantage of our program. And when it came to the other business partners that are potentially out there at the Bayshore Business Park in Mountain View, that's exactly the kind of thing we want to do. We were trying to build some interest at this policy level first to see if we should continue to begin formal outreach and discussion, so that by the time we get to council, we have more formal information that we can share with the council at a later date. But the thought with the partners was, if you don't want to help fund the shuttle, then you don't get a stop. And so we're trying to look at the shuttle really from the standpoint of a business to help it be efficient. And so that was one of the thoughts of expanding into Mountain View. There was one last one. My first nod to Vice Chair Carrillo is that our shuttles are now all CNG based. That was a requirement of our last request for proposals process that we did in the spring. So all of our shuttles are CNG.
And CNG is compressed natural gas.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So I'd like to concur in thanking the staff for their work on the program and the report on the expansion of shuttle services. Thank you for that. Also for putting together an agenda which links parking, transit, and housing, which I think that there is a pretty strong connection between those issues in the city, particularly with the debate on quality of life, residential quality of life. What's the character of Palo Alto? What's the future of Palo Alto? Yet, if you want more transit utilization, maybe more density is a virtue. So I made a number of notes, and I think one question that has come up is that you're doing efforts to track who uses the shuttle, and what are the characteristics of people who don't ride the shuttle. And recently there's some acknowledgement that where Palo Alto is becoming so attractive to home buyers, and the median home price being as high as it is, the annual income required to purchase a house in Palo Alto with a 20% down payment is now approximately $350,000 a year, which is pretty high. And if you assume an annual sort of work year of, say, 2,000 hours, that sort of equates to $175 an hour or $3 a minute. And so people who are able to afford to buy a house in Palo Alto who make $175 an hour, and there are many people who make more than that and many who make less, are they going to be willing to go stand on a curb and wait 60 minutes for the next bus to come by because that just costs them $180? Or I know for people who worked on the iBrick, issues, where the city had some number of projects that were unfunded, costing approximately $445 million. Question is the city putting adequate resources into the shuttle program? Because I think if you put more resources into the shuttle program, such that you reduce the headway, that this average person in Palo Alto who makes $350,000 a year is going to have more frequent service and may actually use the service. And I think the characteristics of people who don't ride the shuttle is something that's hard to quantify or capture, but I think it's probably significant if you want to get more resources that might actually be of great appeal, which actually relates to who is being served by the shuttle program. And we heard from the public there's a pretty significant need for certain groups who may have disabilities or unable to drive or otherwise need accessible public transit services, also seniors, and apparently the program is currently designed as a good job with respect to commuters and students. But I'm not so sure it does a good job with respect to others, and I think that question of serving the others, the non-served others, is the great problem as I see it. I acknowledge that I'm learning a lot from all of this. that you've done and presented to us, there's clearly traffic engineering as a science. I'm not trained in traffic engineering, and so I want to ask sort of the naive question of, if you had a purpose for the transit and the shuttle system, which wasn't necessarily to, during peak commute hours to get commuters to the bullet train or to get students to the public high schools or whatnot, but it was more generally sort of a point A to point B. If you wanted to get from anywhere in Palo Alto to anywhere else in Palo Alto and be able to take transit to get there, so you didn't have to use a car, does this shuttle service actually, provide a practical solution to that problem? And I think that's not the problem that's being solved, but I wish it were. While I was sitting here, I wondered how many of my colleagues, myself on the commission this evening, were able to take transit to come to this meeting tonight, and I think the answer was 0. Now, I actually live pretty close to here. I live in the community center, and I just did a Google map check, and I live 1.4 miles away. And by walking, that's 25 minutes. I actually walk faster than that, so it's about, say, 22 minutes. By car, it's 6 minutes. By bicycle, 7 minutes, assuming the car obeys the speed limit and I bike really fast. But on the bus, even the 35 bus, which has a 30-minute headway, if I just miss it, it takes 18 minutes travel time, so it could take 48 minutes, or roughly double the time it takes to walk. And so I think that with and you're on the shuttle, if there's one that goes on Newell, close to my house, and I could walk out there and it's a 60-minute headway. If I just miss it, that's going to take me an hour and a half versus walking is 25 minutes. So biking is 7 minutes. So the design of the system is not designed to incentivize a resident to use the transit to get downtown to come to the planning commission. You did that, we run late into the evening, you'd have to walk home. And I know Vice Chair Keller showed me where he lives in town. He would have a long walk. So good thing he has an electric vehicle. I guess my last question is, a lot of cities on their buses and shuttles are pretty proactive about having bike racks on shuttles. Are we set up for that?
Yeah, all our shuttles are equipped with at least 2 bike. They can hold up to 2 bikes.
Okay. And I guess then my other concern is, I think if you get back to the question of who is being served, and I think it's pretty well designed to serve the commuters and the high school students, but not so well with respect to other groups, perhaps, that are harder to capture. But the hours of operation, particularly if you have a one-way trip during the hours of operation, and then your return trip is either earlier or later than the hours of operation, then that knocks you out of transit. And I think that this notion that the time of Palo Alto residents is actually quite valuable. This is just a very prosperous, productive community. A lot of people are employed very gainfully. If we want to get people out of cars and able to use transit, I think, earlier in the morning, later night service, not necessarily 7 by 24, but you ought to make it so people could come to city council meetings, come to planning commission meetings, and also serve those groups that aren't just commuters and students. So although we had intended to finish this topic by 8:40, and it's now 8:40, I'm going to allow sort of a lightning round of any commissioners who have something that they really want to add. So is there anybody who feels there's a contribution could be made by another comment? Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So firstly, let's point out that VTA offers the outreach service for people who have mobility and other issues, and it may not be appropriate, but the question is whether VTA could provide something special for the need that was indicated by the residents. That's worthwhile talking to them about. The second thing is whether there's an interest in research park shuttles from Caltrain and also connecting to CalAV. Or coordinated as opposed to employer by employer separate shuttles. There's a concept that was something that was done several years ago by VTA called the concept of operations, and they had about 6 different kinds of identified users and it'd be interesting to see how their identified kinds of users map to the kind of users for the Palo Alto shuttles. And lastly, to avoid Chair Michael's comment about just missing the bus, a lot of transit services are offering things where you can find out when the next bus will come to your stop. And I hope that the next iteration of the Palo Alto shuttle will either provide that if it doesn't already. Thank you.
So why don't we take a short break, and if Tim Wong is watching on TV, please come down and we'll be ready for you shortly. Thanks.
Anything? An intelligent-looking fellow, and yet at the age of 15, he was arrested on a fantastic charge, conspiring to overthrow the United States government. What were you trying to do?
Nothing. It was all in my mind. I mean, I just made it up. I made plans up, and it just happened that I stepped on a few real things, real facts were in my imaginary things.
Let's open the public hearing on our review of the draft housing element. And let's begin with a report from staff, Tim Wong.
Good evening. My name is Tim Wong, Senior Planner for the City of Palo Alto. Tonight is the first of two scheduled meetings for the PTC's review and recommendation of the city's draft housing element. And so just a quick overview. I know it's been a long evening, so I'll try to get through this presentation as quickly as possible. Why are we doing this housing element? What's in a housing element? And these new two series of meetings will be mostly focused on housing element programs. And in addition, this is the public hearing for the CEQA review. There is a 30-day comment period for a mitigated negative declaration. So there is a CEQA review involved in this hearing and what the next steps are after. So why are we doing this? Basically because we have to. The housing element is one of the 7 mandated elements, and it's the only element that requires state certification. And for this cycle, the state has put some more substantial teeth in the timely certification of housing elements. And elements need to be done every 8 years. And this upcoming, or this draft housing element, covers the period of 2015 to 2023. As you all know, the deadline to get the certification is the end of January 2015. Some of the penalties, if the element is not certified, are the city's vulnerable to legal land use challenges. We are not eligible for a number of state housing and transportation grants. And we would, maybe one of the worst is to be required to go through this every 4 years instead of every 8 years. And there have been a number of comments saying, why do we need to participate with this as part of the ABAG process? ABAG assigns us these housing numbers. Why can't we just get out of ABAG? Well, even if we removed ourselves from ABAG, we would still have these housing requirements. So these are the various parts that make up a housing element. And previously, if you look at the top right-hand corner, the PTC had looked at RENA sites at its last May meeting. And for this meeting, we'll be focusing on housing goals, policies, and programs. Just a quick recap, part of the housing element requirement is that we fulfill the regional housing needs allocation number. And for the city, we were assigned 1,988 units, broken down into 4 income levels. Please note that this does not require construction of these units, but the city must provide or accommodate with adequate zoning and other policies that number 1,988. And so we were able to do so. This was just a calculation from last May's meeting showing that actuality, our allocation was 1,988. HCD generally likes to see a surplus of about 200 units. So we needed to find a total target of 2,188 units. But actually, with the carryover, with some units in the pipeline, we only needed to really find sites to accommodate another 369 units. And in May, the PTC recommended to use the Fry site, existing units at Colorado Park, and second units, and some sites along San Antonio. And more importantly, also, they recommended that we continue this process of selecting sites, re-reviewing to see if there are other sites that are more appropriate using transit criteria and those type of things. and that would be folded into the comprehensive plan process. And so now we're focusing in on housing element goals, policies, and programs. So after the identification of sites, all the meetings, the community panel meetings, RHMC meetings, RHMC standing for Regional Housing Mandate Committee meetings, were all focused on goals, policies, and programs. Just with the housing sites, the current housing programs were carried over, but of those, staff did a review, and 9 of those programs have been removed because those programs have either been implemented, such as the density bonus ordinance or upzoning of those CN sites, or they're no longer applicable. And 3 of the current programs have been revised, including the lot consolidation program, which is a prominent program for element certification. And all actions that have, all the revisions that have been done, both programs and text, you have received in attachment A, the summary of revisions, and I believe at places you've received an updated summary of revisions showing the changes that were made to program H219, again, the lot consolidation program. So yes, since June of 2014, we have been looking at adding additional programs. The community panel has proposed a number of programs, which the RHMC has accepted. There are 14 programs, and from the August 2014 community panel meeting, another 6 programs have been recommended for review by the PTC and RHMC. Some of the new programs highlighted are continuing the site review after HCD certification. Again, looking for some of those more transit appropriate sites to be in the housing sites list. And looking at a program to allow for, in mixed use zone sites for extremely small parcels, some horizontal mixed use. In other words, one parcel might be exclusive residential and the adjacent parcel be exclusive commercial. Currently, mixed-use zoning requires that both housing only be developed in conjunction with the mixed-use project. Looking at minimum densities in zoning districts, starting with maybe 8 units on RM15, possibly 15 units in RM30, those type of things. And lastly, to prepare a local parking study to see what demands are for each type of housing. Parking demand for single-family residents, parking demand for senior affordable housing, parking demand for affordable housing. But with that study, proximity to transit would play a part in that evaluation. And so some of the additional programs recommended, these are the 6 programs that were recommended from the August 2014 meeting from the community panel. Oops, sorry. At places you have also received the state's letter commenting on the city's draft housing element, which says that we have substantially met the state's requirements for housing element certification based on the city's acceptance of program 2.1.9, which is again the lot consolidation, which has been amended to provide incentives for 100% affordable housing developments. One of their concerns is the city's sites are relatively smaller sites, and since they're smaller sites in terms of affordable housing development, we probably would not get the densities allowed or needed for affordable housing finance. So therefore, this is to incentivize or provide incentives to create larger lots for affordable housing developments. And lastly, because a lot of our programs currently state to assess consider, evaluate, explore. They wanted something a little more committed, a little more certain. Therefore, many of those programs we've added adopt as appropriate type language. Again, also, this hearing is about CEQA review. There is initial study mitigated neg deck that is open for public comment. Notice was sent out August 29th. The 30-day comment period is closing September 30th. Just to point out, there are no rezones that are necessary as part of this housing element. However, to be safe, we added mitigation measures stating that for site-specific projects, mitigation measures, if warranted, are needed to mitigate traffic and hazardous waste impacts, again, for site-specific projects. The certification schedule, as stated, we're hoping to get you a completely updated draft September 18th in preparation for your October 1st final recommendation meeting. As noted, September 30th is the close of the CEQA comment period. October 2nd, we will be going to the community panel, and October 9th to the RHMC. And hopefully all will recommend in preparation for the November 10th council recommendation. And we will be submitting the draft housing element as revised, whatever form that may be, at the end of November, in anticipation of a end of January certification from the state. That is staff's recommendation, and that concludes my presentation. Oh, and I would like to point out that the city's housing consultant, Laura Stetson from MIG, is present also for questions. Thank you.
So thanks, Tim. I believe we have two speakers from the public. Vice Chair Keller will call you up.
The first speaker is Robert Moss, to be followed by Mark Weiss, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Whoops. Thank you, Chair Michael and Commissioners. First, a general comment. The staff and the Planning Commission and the City Council for several years have said that property which is currently zoned R1 is sacrosanct and will not be upzoned. And then along comes the Maybell project, where R1 zoning was upzoned. The public didn't like it, and that project was killed. So if we're going to talk about R1 being sacrosanct, it really, really should be sacrosanct. Which brings me to the next point. The area that is reviewed, you can look at the Exhibit 2 housing sites map, the report, page 79, for consideration for intensification of use, goes within a quarter mile of El Camino. At least 80% of the properties in that area are zoned and used R1. So when you just go along blindly and say, this is what we're going to look at, I get nervous, and so does the community. So you have to take another look at how you're going to phrase that. Now, on some specific programs, 226, allow exclusively residential use on extremely small parcels. Extremely small is not defined, and I'm addressing specifically El Camino. There are a lot of relatively small properties along El Camino. We do not want those to go from retail to exclusively residential. That's a lousy idea. The intent of the development along El Camino for decades has been to have the kind of retail that people in the adjacent housing areas can walk to. Second, H228, remove the maximum housing density in residential sites. Lousy idea. We want to be able to know what the maximum density in all sites is going to be, and removing it makes it a total wild card. You can't plan on anything. H335, consider revising the second unit in order to allow more of them. Maybe you don't remember, but years ago we were very loose on having cottages in residential zones, and it created a tremendous amount of problems. There was inadequate parking from the new units that were added. There was congestion. There were real problems with compatibility in the neighborhood. I don't think you want to do that. And finally, I'm not clear what you mean about H2110, El Camino pedestrian nodes at higher density. What nodes and what density and what applications, what uses are we going to have there? That should be very specific so we all know what we're talking about.
The next speaker is Mark Weiss, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioner Chair Mark Michael, Commissioner Vice Chair Arthur Keller, and Commissioners. My name is Mark Weiss. I live at 1788 Oak Creek Drive, which incidentally is a 700-unit multi-housing place, and it's pretty good. I'm not against that kind of thing in principle. And with due respect to staff member Mr. Wong, who I know is a longtime Palo Alto community member. In fact, we were schoolmates in 1982 and maybe 81 at Gunn High School. And but I beg to differ in sort of a big sense and in a very specific sense. Housing element means we have to just identify these spots. We don't have to actually build on them or approve sites, is my understanding. And on a certain level, ABAG as a super governmental entity, I really don't know if it represents 20 or 200 communities. But on a certain level, I think we do have our own self-interest and we have the right to resist it. And I think I have this sort of general problem that on a certain level, with due respect, I think leadership is sometimes not reflective of what the average Palo Alton wants. And I think in this case, I do believe we have a very incentivized special interest who really wants to push housing through, and on a certain level, I think the ABAG is biased towards a particular special interest. I spoke here before, and I've spoken to other commissions and boards about just part and parcel, so to speak, the 15-acre, what we call the Fry's property. Sobrato Company bought that recently, and I actually spoke with Tim Steele of their development office on this topic. And we spoke for about 20 minutes by phone the other day, and I was explaining that I think a lot of Palo Altans want a park. That would be something like that would be wonderful in that Ventura neighborhood, which is a little bit underdeveloped in certain ways. And he was sort of taken aghast, like, how could you stand in the way? Like, we have the right. We invested $80 million. We have the right to make $500 million, something like that. It's not a direct quote, but. And even our comp plan, our general plan, and this came up at the Parks Commission, has a per capita acreage in parkland, and we're behind. We're about 25 acres behind in what we think of ourselves as being pro-park. So on a certain level, I mean, maybe 7 acres of park and 7 acres of housing. I like their property in San Jose called Villa Torino. I have a friend in Palo Alto, a homeowner who used to live in Villa Torino, which is a Sobrato property. It's a wonderful place. But at Fry's, they might want to build 3 of those or 3 times the size of that. And yes, there's demand, and Mr. Rosenblum was involved with a group of young people who really want housing here, although there's no evidence that if even 500 more units will make it affordable for any of us. So I want to point out there's no similar seesaw special interest group pushing for park equipment, and so I think you should factor that in there, that there's a lot of people who want to park.
So thank you, Mr. Weiss and Mr. Moss, for your articulate and helpful comments. So just to note, in the recommendation, there's a language that suggests that PTC would recommend that the City Council approve the mitigated negative declaration and adopt the 2015-2023 housing element update in compliance with state law. We're going to do that, take that under consideration on October 1st. So that's not going to happen tonight. Tonight is just a time to give questions and comments. There's a RHMC, Regional Housing Mandate Committee meeting tomorrow. So this is part of the process that Tim laid out. This is has exposure to the public and is going through the various steps. So let's bring it back to the commission for questions or comments. Director Gilman, would you have some comments?
I'm sorry to interject. I just really quickly want to thank Tim for all his hard work on this. You saw the letter we got from HCD. It's really amazing to get such a letter at this point in the process. Normally you get from them this long laundry list of changes you have to make, and you have to jump through many more hoops. They seem to be convinced, that we've done and Tim and his consultants have done a really good job on the first draft, and then in creating what is really just a short handout or table of supplemental changes. They seem to have addressed what the major concerns were from the comments that HCD received and HCD's own comments. So Tim and his consultants have done a terrific job, and I hope that the speakers, actually I wanted to extend an invitation to the speakers to just talk offline with us. I think we can clarify the concerns and questions they raised. I don't think any of the ideas that were changes we're proposing to add are huge departures from what was in the original draft and what was in the current housing element. And I'd be happy to meet with them to make that clear. But that's all I had to add. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe let me just call on Commissioner Tanaka, who's been, I think, serving on the community panel. And I know the community panel has come up with some additional recommendations, and maybe you can help us understand the work that the panel's been doing and that you've been doing.
Sure. We've had a lot of meetings, and Tim's been excellent in helping to lead this. I think you see most of the feedback on attachment C from the actually not attachment C, I was just looking at it. Well, I think earlier attachment. Anyways, I think in general we had a lot of good discussion about the housing element. I think in general there seemed to be supportive in the work that we've done. There's been a few additional comments in there. For most part, I would say that the attendance has been okay. It's heavily weighted on housing advocates, as you can imagine. And I think we should probably consider some of the recommendations.
Okay, with that, just open up to other commissioners. Commissioner Alchek.
So staff, and I guess Tim specifically, well done. I'm proud of the work product. Maybe a more skeptical person would not be surprised by the lack of community support in this process. That's not me. There was a letter attached to our handout. It starts on page 64. If any of you haven't read it, you should read it, because it's, in my opinion, an excellent articulation of the current situation. It was written by Edie Keating, who I don't know, but I'd like to know, because I feel the same way as she does, which is to say that as proud of the work product as I am, I feel like the climate in Palo Alto is not supportive of making room for affordable housing. And one of our community members spoke tonight about this special interest group. I'm assuming he's referring to developers. And I just want to highlight something. You go to the grocery store, and there's no special aisle for individuals who don't make enough money for the same box of Cheerios that I spend $3.50 on in my aisle. There is food stamps, but those are provided by the federal government. And there's no aisle in a Ford dealership where you can buy a Mustang at 60% off if you demonstrate that you're low income and the dealer takes the hit. That just doesn't exist. There's buses and that's your transportation route. And I just sort of want to suggest to the community at large here that this isn't about making 50 million or 800 million or whatever that number was that was shared tonight. Edie Keating makes a very, very important point here, which is that, you know, the Maybell referendum supporters suggested that they didn't oppose affordable housing, they just opposed density. Well, the burden here is that without density, affordable housing isn't possible. And I'm encouraged by the progress that we're making with the HCD and our housing element. I just hope that this is not just us doing the motions. I personally feel like we have a moral obligation to build affordable housing. Everybody, there's a tremendous, or maybe it's a not so tremendous community of individuals in this town that think that I'm, you know, a private developer, which I'm not, that I support, that I'm uber supportive of developers. I'm not. But I am a very strong proponent for affordable housing. And the reason why I support the PC process, which is currently under moratorium, is because it offers an opportunity for affordable housing. And the reason why I support density is in large part because it creates an opportunity for affordable housing. I think that Edie Keating's suggestion here about a 100% affordable housing initiative, in response to the moratorium on PCs, I would support that. I would support some serious incentivizing of affordable housing creation, because I can support this magnificent housing element, but I also want to be a part of a planning commission that helps to deliver on what I consider not just a responsibility to draft a housing element, but and implement the goals of that drafted housing element. And I don't think we can do that unless we actually embrace this type of development. And so I would encourage anybody that is interested in this topic to read Edie Keating's letter on 64 and 65, and to think very hard about, you know, what our obligations are with respect to affordable housing when they are evaluating this housing element.
Commissioner Gardias.
So thank you very much for moving this process forward. I mean, this is great. You're the driver of this, and you know, we appreciate your work very much. My questions are from different angles, right? So first of all, is that the last time when we discussed this, we were asking about the updated property list, and I was hoping that the log of the properties that would be coming up at every meeting about the affordable housing would be updated. We talk about 27 University, and we talk about some other properties that may be identified on your list. So my question is to you, would you be able to provide updated list for the next meeting whenever it's going to be? So,
if I understand your Commissioner Gardias, an updated list of affordable housing sites, or just...
That's right, yes, affordable housing sites.
Oh, we do have a list of that. We do have a affordable housing database that shows all the affordable housing that has been constructed or developed. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, you had tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 sites, right? And this looks like it wasn't updated from the last meeting. So my question is about this, right? Has anything changed, right, in this log?
Oh, no, those sites have not changed. What the Planning Commission had done in late May was to recommend adopting the Tier 1 sites, which was the Fry's, the second units, and the San Antonio sites.
Right, and I was part of the meeting, right?
Yeah.
My question was, are there any new properties or sites identified in meantime since that meeting?
Oh, excuse me. No additional sites were identified since those sites were able to fulfill the city's RENA requirement. But we do have a program to go back and look at other sites that may be more appropriate and switch out sites here and there.
Yeah, if I can add to that, if you recall, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to the council to go with basically the, let me quote, easy sites, the tier 1 sites, Fry's, San Antonio's, the existing sites, carry them forward, second units, the existing units at the Colorado Park Avenue apartments. And then to basically go that direction, get the housing element certified, and then after certification, continue the investigation for additional sites, swapping out potentially some of the sites on San Antonio and South El Camino. The City Council adopted that recommendation. They agreed with that approach entirely. So we are going to look for additional sites, as you suggest, Commissioner, but not until after we get certification on the housing element as it is.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for, yes, that was indeed our recommendation. I was just wondering, maybe there was something that changed in the meantime, right? So, okay, so it's going to be after the approval and submittal, right? Okay, very good. So if you don't mind, would like to spend a couple of minutes on some specific comments. So number one, right, and also in the reference to the letter that my colleague Commissioner Alczak mentioned, right? So there is some of those programs, right? They may fall under planned community concept, and I just wanted to make sure that they are not overriding that concept of the planned community. So when you go through your listing, right? For example, just a second, I'm trying just to find the right program. So I think that the program 2.1.11, right? Person string, right? It relates to partially to the planned community concept, because we talked at the other meeting about planned community that we would just do an overlay of the planned community in the city, where pretty much we will allow for the greater commercial expansion, and then some pedestrian nodes, and then access to some sites may be related to that overlay as well, right? So what I am addressing here is that some of the programs that you have here may be addressed under planned community as well. And my ask is pretty much just to reconcile this program with our discussions on the planned community program.
Commissioner Gardias, I don't think we got as detailed, but I certainly believe the PC zone, whatever form that may take after discussions, may be used to help achieve these pearls on a string, to develop these pedestrian nodes. So it could be a part of a tool, but I am not sure if this will overstep or go beyond the PC zoning reach. And so,
if I can just add to that, I thought that this concept of this program came out of the community panel, and I thought it was a really interesting one. I thought the members of the panel anticipated that this kind of planning along El Camino would probably go through like a specific plan or a precise plan process rather than using PC or other tools. It doesn't say that here, but I think our intention was to leave this as a to-do item. After the housing element is adopted, we would give some further thought to how we would accomplish these objectives. And I think we would be loath to specify a tool at this time. We don't want to constrain ourselves or future commissions and staffs and council and select one way to get to this objective over another. We are going to mention PC reform in the housing element. I think the text changes related to that are described elsewhere in this table. But the idea is to talk about PC reform in the section on constraints rather than in one of these programs.
Right, I understand. I mean, my intention was pretty much to make sure that one program doesn't contradict the other.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much the concept, right?
Understood.
And some benefits under PC would be applicable to your program here.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
The last, I have one more question to your consultant, right? Because there is in the documents, there is a comment from the Housing Authority that just talks about creating of the affordable housing on the lots that are smaller than 1 acre. And then we talk about this at the beginning, that if you have small lots, right, there are some doubts how you can create affordable housing on those small lots. So my question would be to you, could you tell us about your experience or some other programs that were successfully able to utilize small lots for affordable housing?
Thank you, Commissioner. For the record, Laura Stetson from MIG, 169 North Marengo in Pasadena, California, with offices also in Berkeley. Yes, I think Palo Alto, first of all, has shown and demonstrated that you can build affordable housing on smaller lots, oftentimes with subsidy. And the city has used monies to assist in that regard, and I've seen that in cities in both Northern and Southern California. Prior to the demise of redevelopment, that was a very large source of assistance to help build on smaller lots. Cities that, like Palo Alto, have inclusionary or fees, below market rate fees for programs, are able to provide that type of assistance for small lots at particular locations, provided that there are incentives and relaxations, if you will, sometimes of development standards to get that to work, which they're entitled through density bonuses or other provisions. It's a tougher thing to do, but indeed that's something that can be accomplished.
And may I add, many of our lots, yes, they're small, 1/4 acre to a third of an acre large, but the city has been able to successfully, their last 2 affordable housing developments have been on, I think, 0.6, 0.7 acres, the Treehouse and 801 Alma, and we were getting densities between 50 to 83 units. So actually HCD required program of incentivizing to combine lots may effectively help the city produce more affordable housing that way.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That was my feeling, that we can succeed on those smaller lots, right? And then this program of the combinations, providing some subsidies or relaxations for the combination of lots, right? I'd rather just to have program as a preliminary program to provide subsidies of the smaller lots, as opposed to and then as a first tier of the programs, and the second tier would be combination of those lots, right? With the intention to pretty much sustain the smaller ownership of the ownership of the smaller lots, right?
Correct. Or they can use all those incentives at the same time, such as 801 Alma. They use financial subsidies. They did use lot consolidation to achieve 0.6, 0.7 acre. So, yeah, it definitely is. All those factors together definitely do help in achieving a feasible, affordable housing development.
Thank you. If you could eventually just maybe for the next meeting, just provide us with some details or some successful programs for those smaller lots, that would be helpful to
Certainly.
Our studies. Thank you.
Commissioner Rosenblum.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief because as Hillary just mentioned, this process, I think, is we've submitted, we're going to do the work of figuring out the most desirable places and the fine-grained policies after
the January 31st deadline. Is that correct? So my main question is, have you put together the series of whatever venues or I probably should know this, but is it the case that we will wait as part of the comprehensive planning process to nail down the exact sites? Because one thing that has always made me uncomfortable with this process is that we've taken this very easy but logical approach of taking sites that don't need to be rezoned and doing a mathematical exercise, submitting it upward to say, look, we've fulfilled our obligation. And we've all had this understanding that we will refrain from criticizing any individual site until such time as we get our approval, and then we can go and start, concentrating growth in the right places and protecting other places from growth and making sure that the plan is coherent. But one thing that does make me a little bit uncomfortable is just I'm never sure of when we're going to do it and exactly how. I'm assuming that this is rolled into the comp planning process. Is that correct?
Thank you, Commissioner. Our intention was to do that as part of the alternatives analysis in the comprehensive plan update process. Now, the council's taking a slightly different approach than we anticipated to the comp plan process, but we'll discuss that with them on October 8th. And just at their last meeting on Monday, it did come up again, their commitment to explore alternatives that would eliminate some of these housing sites in the south and either identify new housing sites in the north, in Cal Ave and downtown, or increase densities so that you would make up for the sites that you eliminate.
Okay. The second part of the presentation, you have new program highlights. It seems like you want us to comment on additional programs for PTC to consider. On the new program highlights, everything makes a lot of sense to me, with the exception of one that I just don't think I understand, which is the consider horizontal mixed-use developments by allowing the transfer of zoning requirements to adjacent parcels. I know that this has been discussed, but can you give me, again, a two-sentence explanation of how that works?
Sure. For example, in the CN zone right now, in mixed-use development, housing can only be built as part of a mixed-use development.
Yeah.
So, and there's FARs associated with each, 0.5 for for non-residential and 0.4 for housing or something like that. So, if you have two adjacent parcels, one could take the full 0.4 plus 0.4 to get a 0.8 residential FAR in one parcel and get a 1.0 non-residential FAR on the adjacent
And have
property.
we done this before?
No, not that I'm aware of. Not in Palo Alto.
It's really not permitted under our zoning right now, so we're talking about adding a program that would instruct us to permit this in lieu of small lot consolidation. So this would be another way to tackle that same issue where you have small lots that are identified as housing sites, trying to make one of them attractive for housing by letting the non-residential component be satisfied on the adjacent parcel.
Thank you. I am supportive of all the additional programs for PTC consideration. I think they all seem worthwhile. There's some caveats to that. It all depends on where these things are put, but in terms of mostly you're saying, should we study this or evaluate that? Every single one of them seems like a worthwhile thing to evaluate. There's nothing that would raise alarm bells saying, no, you shouldn't study this. Something like minimum densities for mixed use raises alarm bells if you really did that all over town. No matter where you put mixed use, you had to have a minimum density. I think that would be unwise. But the fact that you would study the implications of certain min densities in certain locations seems like a logical thing to study. So everything that you've listed here seems like a logical thing to prepare us for that next step to make the specific recommendations for housing sites. So thank you for preparing those.
So Commissioner Tanaka, first called on you for the community panel. Do you have any other comments that are on a more personal level?
So I would say that in general, I think the city, the commission, the community has put a lot of work into this, and we're almost to the finish line, which is exciting. I think as we kind of consider the finer points and other suggestions, I think one thing to think about is, and I realize this is mandatory and we don't necessarily have control over the allocation. But I think first and foremost for us as commissioners, I think it's important for us to think about the community and what does the community want and what's important for the community. And I think if I think about it, I think what's important for the community is making sure that the quality of life in Palo Alto is the highest possible, and that Palo Alto is not an island. We're not surrounded by water on all sides. We're actually landlocked, and that that ABAC doesn't necessarily consider that. So I think that we should do what's necessary to meet the ABAC requirements, but I don't necessarily think that we need to do extreme measures. So that's my personal thought. So I think our first and foremost responsibility is to the community and to really maintain the quality of life here in Palo Alto. So with that said, I'll give a few specific thoughts. So I think first one, I do agree with the earlier speaker, which talked about upzoning like R1 areas. I think R1s is pretty sacred to Palo Alto. I think most people understand that. I think that's something we want to make sure is preserved, no matter what the ABAC allocation may be. I think upzoning R1 is generally not a good idea. I also believe that, I understand the idea about horizontal mixed use, but I do think it's also important to have a continuity of retail, otherwise you get dead spots. And I think we don't want to lose ground floor retail. I think that's really important, no matter where it is, because the quality of life is also dictated by where you could shop. If you can't go anywhere but, or all the shopping for Palo Alto is in other cities, that's not good either. So I think we don't want to have programs that hurt that. And I think the other thing is, I know with the Maybell project, there was I think a financial loan granted to the project, and then we had the PC process. I know this is a different case, but I think just for transparency, I don't know whether, I think evaluating a program to provide financial assistance for Colorado is probably, in my opinion, a better way of doing it than a mandate to provide it. So that's a kind of a slight change, but that's on 2.2.4. But I think there was, in the Maybell project, there was some outcry over the city doing this financial support of project before there's things were fully figured out. So I think that's one thing that we may want to change, is just make that more of a evaluate versus do. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Vice Chair Keller.
Thank you. So a couple of things. Firstly, I think that the idea of transit-oriented housing is not appropriate for the city of Palo Alto. More people bike to work who live in Palo Alto that take all forms of public transit combined. More people walk to work than take all forms, who live in Palo Alto, than take all forms of public transit combined. So the issue of housing location should not be considered based on transit, should be based on services. And that's why our PTOD is not transit-oriented housing, it's pedestrian and transit-oriented development, because we understand the need for pedestrian focus, because the transit focus doesn't make as much sense for housing in Palo Alto. And that's just the data. First thing. Second thing, there's a mention here of H2.2.7, which is explore requiring minimum residential densities to encourage more housing instead of office space when mixed-use sites develop. And then there's a comment about adopting an ordinance. I think we need something that talks about unit size. More specifically, there's also a mention to it about encouraging based on unit size for 2.2.8. Let me give you the data. Less than 4% of the total housing units in Palo Alto today are studio apartments. And about 17 or 18% of the total units today in Palo Alto are one-bedroom apartments, or one-bedroom units. On the other hand, over a quarter of the people who live in Palo Alto and households are one-person households. Another quarter or more of people who live in Palo Alto are two-person households. So clearly there is a tremendous need for smaller units. And so I think that we should have a new program that explores limits to unit size or number of bedrooms to encourage the creation of more housing units. And that came up in CalAV, it came up in other issues. We should consider that, not saying we should necessarily do it, but we should explore it and adopt an ordinance to implement this program if appropriate. I think the data shows that we definitely need small units. That's what we're short of.
Commissioner Keller, if I could just ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
The program that the panel recommended to address this issue was 2.2.8, number 24 on the table that was handed out this evening. And this was the one that I think Mr. Moss referred to. It says assess the potential of removing maximum residential densities, i.e. dwelling units per acre, in mixed-use districts to allow the creation of smaller housing units within the allowable FAR. So if I can just clarify, you would still have a density maximum on the site limited by FAR, but you wouldn't have a dwelling units per acre maximum. And so there would be an incentive for the builder would try and cram in a lot of units, and you get smaller units, as you suggest.
Well, actually, this is a way of having potentially smaller units. I'm actually saying that what we build is only small units because that's what Palo Alto needs.
So rather than using this incentive approach, actually require
I'm suggesting another program that would explore limits on unit size in order to promote more production of more housing units. It's another thing to consider as an alternative. I'm not suggesting you delete 2.2.8. It's an alternative to consider along with 2.2.8 in the process.
Because you think 2.2.8 won't be effective at achieving the goal?
No, I don't think 2.2.8 will be effective for achieving the goal in general. I believe it will be effective in terms of potentially for below market rate housing developers who may wish to create smaller units, but for market rate, it's not going to solve the problem. So I don't think that it's going to really address the issue of having market rate housing that's smaller. Okay, the next point that I have is for 2.1.12. It basically rattles off a bunch of areas. It should also include parts of those areas. For example, we may wish to have a precise plan for the Fry site or South El Camino Real as opposed to all of El Camino Real or all of California Avenue area. And so parts of those areas should also be considered. I think that's an easy change. With respect to H3.3.8, we should also consider the efficiency of parking types. For example, townhouses with tuck-under parking is not a very efficient way of doing parking, particularly since a lot of places people store stuff in those housing units, in those garages, rather than parking in those garages, and therefore there's spillover parking. So I think we need to think about incentivizing more shared parking and disincentivizing private parking garages in townhouse type developments. So that considering the efficiency of parking would do that. And by the way, one of the ways of doing that, if we wish to, is to, because we can't change parking limits in certain cases, we can count enclosed attached garages in the FAR because they essentially count towards massing for those kind of developments. And that would effectively discourage them. Number 5, we should have a new program. And this is something that I've tried to talk about in the past, and if we can't consider it now, then we can consider it when we revisit the housing element, not only the list, but also policies. And that is consider limiting market rate housing to the RENA allocation of above moderate income category to reduce competition for sites with below market rate housing developments. So right now, because we have a lot of market rate housing developers that that compete with these sites, they bid up the prices and we build a lot more market rate housing than below market rate housing. If we limited the amount of market rate housing to the RENA allocation for above moderate, it will allow the below market rate developers to actually compete for these sites. And right now that's not as possible.
And Commissioner Keller, if I could beg your indulgence, that's the kind of addition that I would be nervous about making in this draft based on HCD's comments. You know, they gave us a good recommendation here. They're not expecting to see a dramatic policy change or a limit on housing of any kind when we send this back. So maybe your suggestion that we consider that in the future iteration is a good one, and we could take it up then.
That's fine. I don't have a problem with considering it as long as we can revisit policies in that process so that we can consider that. Three more quickly. One is that H2.1.10 should reference a precise plan for East Palo Alto, for El Camino Real, and that the consideration of increased zoning should not be based on the El Camino design guidelines, but should be based on a precise plan. Because you really need to look at that parcel by parcel, block by block, and what the adjacency issues are, and actually do that study. And if you just do it based on this pearls on a string, it's not going to really consider it without a precise plan. So this should be dependent on a precise plan for El Camino Real. The next thing is in terms of promoting below market rate housing. I don't know if we have housing impact fees for commercial development, but we should consider increasing that if that makes sense. It's in order to promote the building of below market rate housing. I think that, yes.
We do have a program to revisit our housing impact fees.
Great, thank you. And lastly, there's a discussion of H2.2.6 with respect to shared, I'll trade you my housing for your office. But when what is required is ground floor retail, then you can't really trade office for ground floor retail. That's not really according to Hoyle. So you have to be careful about the use of that nature. For example, there was this Alma Plaza had ground floor retail on the second floor because of the Adient thing, which is I don't consider retail anyway. But that's a different story. So we need to think about the idea of ground floor retail means ground floor, not second story. So that's something that needs to be considered. Thank you.
So I think we're about to cross the finish line with the housing element, and congratulations to everybody who's worked on this, all of staff, the community input, the community panel, PTC, and others. So I've avoided any wordsmithing at this point, but I think one of the things that is often said when we have this discussion is our compliance towards the legal requirement. Why do we have the housing elements? Because we have to. I wish we would stop saying that. It really demeans the impact of housing on the quality of life in the city. And I think we have a planning commission, and we have a comprehensive plan, and we have a housing element because we care about the city. We care about the future of the city, the quality of life, the livability, and that's why we have a housing element. So please bear that in mind. There's just a higher purpose to this. Palo Alto has been a special place. We'd like it to continue to be special. It may evolve and be even more special or less, depending on how we manage it. So this is really an opportunity, and as it has been a challenge. So my wife and I read recently a book by a guy named Richard Florida, was probably about 10 years old, called Who Is Your City? And he really likes this area. He likes this area between, say, Monterey and up to Napa, which is kind of includes Silicon Valley and San Francisco and whatnot. I think one of his issues that he had a lot of graduate students crunching numbers and gathering data was that there's a creative class. If you follow the creative class, then this really is a wonderful thing. There's lots of energy, lots of vibrant, dynamic, great place to live. Diversity is really a big variable in his studies, whether the city's progressive, open-minded. These are all things that make for higher quality of life. And this area in particular scores very high on those things. Other areas do well in different ways. From Ashland, Oregon, up through Vancouver, British Columbia, he calls Cascadia. And my wife and I recently dropped our daughter off at college at University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, and we're actually looking at making an investment in somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. So we looked around Seattle, which is lovely, and same kind of creative class, high tech, particularly in the east side with Microsoft, and apparently Amazon's adding 100 employees a week. Google has moved up there. Property values are going, just like Palo Alto. Portland, not nearly so high tech oriented, not nearly as dynamic economically, but wonderful. Recently nominated the best cycling city in the country. They're down to number 4 in the recent survey in Bicycling magazine, but New York is number 1. But the same kind of issues of diversity and different qualities. Some of these places are much more affordable than Palo Alto. So where Palo Alto is north of $1,000 a square foot, we're looking at Seattle was probably running kind of $800 a square foot. Down the Pearl District in Portland was $500 a square foot. Some of the suburbs, $300 a square foot. So this issue of what we might look at in future iterations of the housing element, or maybe after it's certified we sort of fine tune it, or as we roll out the full comprehensive plan. A lot of people who come to our planning commission meetings talk with great feeling and conviction and experience about what's important to them in Palo Alto, and Bob Moss said a very common comment that R1 should be sacrosanct. Well, that has consequences. It has consequences in supply and demand. So that basically means you restrict supply, there's increased demand, prices go up. We've seen that. That's just a basic law of economics. It's great if you're here, if you've got a piece of the city, particularly if you happen to buy in before Prop 13 was established. But whenever you got here, if you say R1 is sacrosanct, then that's sort of a knife in the heart of affordable housing. A lot of the things that are in different parts of the comprehensive plan, which are pretty important, I think recently there's been some publicity about our commitment to have access to public parks from every neighborhood. So do we have enough parks? And the Fry site was identified as some place that, if it weren't zoned otherwise, there could be a park, at least in part of it, impacting the school population. And then there's the other things that are, supposedly sacrosanct, like the height limit, density, building setbacks, floor area ratio. And all of these things affect whether or not you can have affordable housing. When Commissioner Alchek and Eduardo Martinez and I worked on the public benefits memo, one of the things that I tried to educate myself on, because I never was trained in this, was what's zoning all about? And I came across this one article, which was written by an economics professor, who basically said that when zoning was originally promulgated back in, I guess, the 20s, the Supreme Court case made it legal, was that really the explicit purpose of zoning was to protect and increase the value of property. And I think that really is the subtext of zoning in Palo Alto, is to make sure that this is valuable, dirt that we put our houses on, the rental, and we want to keep the value high, keep the prices high, make them higher. That's really what zoning does, most often. This was the thesis of this guy. But affordable housing is smaller and cheaper. The opposite of that is nicer, larger, more valuable. So there's a lot of people come here and say, don't ruin the city. We've got nice, large, more valuable houses. Don't make them cheaper. But I think there's some tension there, and I think we should have that conversation on an explicit level, because the first responders, the teachers, the nurses, the plumbers, if we don't want them commuting from and creating greenhouse gas problems, we have to allow them to live with us, among us. And I think Palo Alto historically, when I grew up here, was a really nice place to be, and that's why we put our family here, because there was more economic diversity than Atherton or Portola Valley or Saratoga. And that economic diversity, because of our success and prosperity, is challenged. So I think that we're just about to cross the finish line in this iteration of the housing element. So congratulations. I think the success is within grasp, but I really look forward to, over the next probably 2 years, the full comprehensive plan discussion. And I think that the outreach in terms of our Palo Alto to get people thinking about it, participating more. There is a question that's pretty complex in terms of balancing where we're coming from and where we're going. And if we want to have affordable housing, maybe R1 should be trimmed. But the height limit should be relaxed. Maybe we should have some greater density where it makes sense, so we could have more use of transit. So what Vice Chair Keller said about the data, about what's true, is people don't use transit. Well, guess what? We don't have transit. So that's why it's not used. So if you want to get somewhere, you walk, or you drive, or you ride your bike. I think that this is great. We'll approve it the next time it comes up. Council will approve it. This will be done. Good job. But let's have that bigger conversation, and hopefully the community will show up. I presume a few people came because they were listening to President Obama talk about foreign policy, but maybe they were just feeding their family. So thanks. We will reconvene on October 1st on this topic. We have minutes to approve for the August 13th, 2014 meeting, which commissioners received electronically.
I move to adopt as amended.
Okay, and is there a second? Second by everybody. Who was first? Michael. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Any commission or staff announcements, updates, reports, or comments? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned at
Get out there. How high?